Chapter 76. Ning Shu didn't expect the original owner's younger brother to be such a joker. Could this be the plot? A good person would appear in the enemy's camp? A good person in Su Meng's eyes? Ning Shu looked at Su Lan. She was a little fresh meat with a clean temperament, not as cool and arrogant as the male lead Xiao Yan. TSK, so this is the future master of the Su family. Everything in the Su family will be inherited by Su Lan. Su Lan, apologize to your sister. Madame Su saw her daughter's unkind expression. She's your sister. How can you just listen to what Su Meng says? Madame Su loved her son dearly, but her daughter was also her own flesh and blood. Now that they quarreled because of Su Meng, Madame Su hated Su Meng even more. Su Lan frowned and straightened her neck. It's my sister's fault. Everyone is sad that we lost our child, but it's wrong of her to frame someone else. Ning Shu rolled his eyes and sneered in his heart. He walked in front of Su Lan. She wasn't as tall as Su Lan, but when she looked up at Su Lan's heart trembled. Her eyes were very cold, making Su Lan's heart flutter. Ning Shu frowned and looked at Su Lan. Were you there? Do you know how it happened? Before Su Lan could speak, Ning Shu's hand slapped Su Lan's face, causing her head to tilt to the side. Su Lan turned her head and looked at Ning Shu with resentment. Ning Shu's slap stunned everyone present. Su Bo's face turned ugly. His daughter hit his son, especially now that his daughter was married. Even if it was someone from another family, now that they came to meddle in his family's affairs, they even dared to enter his house and hit people. Su Bo coldly snorted, but it didn't make Ning Shu feel anything. People always save themselves, then the heavens save them. Ning Shu didn't have a good impression of Su Bo. This mission couldn't start with the Su family. An old-fashioned head of the family, a man who knelt under the halo of the female lead, Mary Su, deserved to be defeated. On the contrary, Su Ran and Madame Su were both women, so they could resist the halo of Mary Su to a certain extent. But in Su Lan's heart, her sister and mother were the bad guys. Madame Su looked at Ning Shu and said, "What are you doing? You're making your family sad and your enemies happy." Ning Shu smiled and ignored Su Lan's resentful eyes. He raised his hand and gave Su Lan a big slap. "You're already an adult, but you don't even have the ability to understand right and wrong. Without the Su family, you're just scum." He was just relying on the Su family's support, living a life that was above the common populace, just like a noble young master. Once Xiao Yan plundered the Su family, this noble young master would have to eat dirt. People like Su Lan couldn't even catch up with the heat of the feces. She looked like a little bottom, just looking like someone who was suppressed by others. Ning Shu looked down on brainless people like Su Lan the most. They were played around by women. He estimated that before Xiao Yan made a move, Su Lan would offer up the Su family with both hands to resolve the hatred of the previous generation and make up for the grievances of the female lead. The halo of Mary Su was really powerful. "Why did you hit me, Su Ran? People like you deserve to be loved by no one. You're cold and selfish. Your life is so poor, and your heart is so vicious." Half of Su Ran's face was swollen. Ning Shu thought, how did such a perverted person come into being? Ning Shu laughed and raised his hand to give Su Lan another slap. Ning Shu suddenly realized that he had fallen in love with the feeling of slapping one side of the face. The two sides of her face formed a sharp contrast. "I hit you to tell you that I don't need anyone, and I don't need your love. I hit you because you slandered me." Ning Shu blew on his hand. "What are you talking about? Don't forget that Su Meng is your cousin. Looking at you, I would think that you've fallen in love with her. What nonsense are you talking about?" Su Lan anxiously shouted at Ning Shu with a pale face, "Your thoughts are so dirty." "Who are you shouting at?" Ning Shu raised his hand and gave the emotional Su Lan another slap. Su Bo stood up and shouted, enough. What do you want? Su Bo's gaze lingered between Ning Shu and Su Lan, and finally stopped on Ning Shu. As a married woman, you should take good care of your in-laws and husband. Why are you throwing a tantrum so easily? What happened to the etiquette that you were taught since you were young? Dad. Ning Shu didn't even want to call him dad now. He wasn't his dad to begin with. Ning Shu always thought that if you were good to him, he would be good to you. There was no such thing as love or hate for no reason in this world. Other than Madame Su, Ning Shu didn't like the father and son of the Su family. Before I leave, I have something to say. Ning Shu pointed at Su Lan, whose half-face was swollen, with a look of disdain. If the heir of the Su family is like this, he might as well be swallowed up by the Shao family. Anyway, looking at him like this, Su Meng is his family. She doesn't even have feelings for me, her sister. As for you two, TSK. Su Ran, you vicious woman, are you crazy? Su Lan listened to Ning Shu's words. You said that I don't treat you as my sister, but now you're saying that I'm your younger brother. I don't treat you as my younger brother. Ning Shu lightly said, because in your heart, Su Meng is your sister. Naturally, I won't treat you as my younger brother. Ning Shu raised his hand. Su Lan shivered, thinking that Ning Shu was going to hit him again, and took 2 steps back. Look at you, you have the word spare tire written on your head. In the future, don't make a fuss in front of me. Otherwise, every time I see you, I'll hit you once. Ning Shu lightly said. Don't try to reason with this kind of brainless person. Otherwise, they will use their rich experience to defeat you. However, if you want to ask, why do these men obediently let Ning Shu hit them? That's because Ning Shu would retreat to a safe position every time she hit them. If the men were shameless, they could chase her around the house and hit her. Obviously, Su Lan was not such a person. He would not do such a thing. Moreover, Su Lan's reflexes were not sharp. After being hit by Ning Shu, he would only look at her with shocked and resentful eyes. Therefore, Ning Shu despised him even more. Ning Shu came out of the Su family and looked up at the sky. This time, he couldn't start with the Su family. He had to find a new entrance. The Su family was not the only one he could cooperate with. Moreover, Ning Shu's current intention was to make the Su family suffer. Ning Shu was not an emotionless machine. She also had her own emotions. During the mission, she would also have her own preferences. The host wanted to protect the Su family and prevent the Shao family from annexing it. If the Shao family was destroyed, they naturally couldn't annex the Su family. Originally, she wanted to join hands with the Su family, but the Su family obviously looked down on her as a married daughter. There was nothing to talk about with the Su family. Ning Shu probably would not come to the Su family in the future. Ning Shu decided to sell the dowry shares that the Su family gave her and the shares that the Shao family gave to her daughter-in-law. They were all exchanged for real money to complete the great task of destroying the Shao family. P.S. Some students think that the school doctor and Li Wen are the same person. The author kneels down to the student's imagination. One has a venomous tongue and nitpicky OCD, wanton and unrestrained love of freedom, and the other has a deep and expressionless face, seemingly emotional yet ruthless person. How could they be the same person? Chapter 77. Ning Shu decided to sell the ancient shares of the Shao family and the Su family. The money he got was the real deal. The president, whose face was swollen after being beaten by Ning Shu, went to see Su Meng with a swollen face. Su Meng didn't recognize Xiao Yan at all and screamed for help. Xiao Yan could only look at Su Meng with an evil look and said incoherently with a swollen face, "It's me, I'm Xiao Yan." Su Meng was stunned and asked anxiously, "What's wrong with you?" Xiao Yan wanted to smile evilly, but the wound on his face was pulled and he grimaced in pain. After a long time, he said, "Are you concerned about me?" "Humph. Su Meng snorted and turned her head away from Xiao Yan. I have nothing to do with you. Why should I care about you? I don't want to see you. Humph, go away. Xiao Yan smiled. I know you care about me. Why can't you admit it? You have your wife to care about. It's not my turn to care about you. Su Meng curled her lips and pouted, which made Xiao Yan swallow a mouthful of saliva. Don't mention that bitch Su ran to me. My face is all because of that bitch. Xiao Yan gnashed his teeth and said in a gloomy and resentful voice. Su Meng covered her mouth in surprise and stared at Xiao Yan with her almond-shaped eyes. Xiao Yan was a little distracted by Su Meng's look. Although I hate Su Ran very much, I also know that Su Ran loves you very much. How could she hit you? She is too cruel. How could she hit you like this? Su Meng said as she reached out her hand and gently touched Xiao Yan's face. Xiao Yan's eyes lit up. Previously, Su Meng had been very angry about Su Ran's pregnancy. Ever since that bitch Su Ran started her confinement period, she had ignored him. Now that she took the initiative to show concern for him, Xiao Yan immediately grabbed Su Meng's hand and hissed, "My face hurts." Ah! Su Meng opened her eyes wide and looked at Xiao Yan with watery eyes. Did I hurt you? I'll go find some medicine for you. Xiao Yan grabbed Su Meng, who was about to go look for the medicine, and pulled her into his arms. He looked at Su Meng with sparkling eyes and said softly, "You are my medicine. When I see you, I don't feel pain anymore." As he spoke, he kissed Su Meng. At first, Su Meng struggled a little. Her eyes widened in shock, and then she closed her eyes. Xiao Yan pressed Su Meng down on the sofa and rubbed her body. Su Meng's face turned pink as she moaned, Don't. This sound made Xiao Yan incomparably excited. His lower body was in high spirits, but it also made Xiao Yan hiss in pain. His lower body felt like it was being torn apart, making Xiao Yan feel as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over him. Su Ran, this despicable woman. He had already waited for the doctor to confirm that he was fine before coming to look for Su Meng. After being kicked by Su Ran, it was a little swollen. The doctor had already reduced the swelling, but he did not expect that it would be so painful when it hardened. Su Meng wriggled in Xiao Yan's arms and moaned. She opened her hazy eyes and looked at the man on top of her. Xiao Yan endured the pain. He should have kissed Su Meng's lips, but instead, he kissed her forehead. Xiao Yan looked at Su Meng tenderly. I will wait until you truly accept me. I want to give you a real wedding night. Su Meng blinked her eyes and then realized that something was wrong. She pushed Xiao Yan away and gathered her collar. She widened her eyes and shouted at Xiao Yan, "What did you do to me? You have a wife. How can you do such a thing to me? Humph, big pervert." Su Meng said hatefully to Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan reached out and pulled Su Meng to his side. Su Meng struggled and hit Xiao Yan's chest with her little fist. "Let go of me, you big pervert." "Yes, I'm a big pervert. What's wrong with me doing such a thing to my wife?" Xiao Yan looked at Su Meng seriously. "You are my only wife in this life." Su Meng's body suddenly froze. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Yan. "You are lying to me. Don't you have a cousin? Remember, I have nothing to do with you." "No, we have nothing to do with each other. You are my cousin-in-law. My wife will always be you. As for Su Ran, I will deal with her." Xiao Yan said gloomily. "Not only Su Ran, but also the Su family. I will take revenge for all the grievances you have suffered. I will also avenge my father-in-law and mother-in-law." Su Meng's face blushed and she was a little touched. Then she said coquettishly, "Who are your father-in-law and mother-in-law? Don't call them that. I have never thought of marrying you." Xiao Yan made a lot of promises to Su Meng. The two people were very affectionate, but there was a little shadow in Xiao Yan's heart, which was his lifeblood. Coming out of Su Meng's small apartment, Xiao Yan went to the hospital. As long as he thought of this, Xiao Yan thought of the woman he hated, the person who was nominally his wife. When he heard the doctor say that it was not wasted, Xiao Yan breathed a sigh of relief and asked why it was so painful when there was a reaction. The doctor said that he had to pay more attention to recuperation and should not have sex in the next 2 months. Su ran, this bitch. Xiao Yan stepped on the gas and went back to the Xiao family, but Ning Shu arrived home before Xiao Yan. When Ning Shu arrived home, the house was quiet. Even Mr. Xiao and Mrs. Xiao were not at home. He also did not see Su Debao and Su Xiaobao. Ning Shu pulled a servant and asked, "Where are the others in the house?" Seeing that it was the young madam, the servant looked a little indifferent and said, "I don't know." "Oh, anyone in the Xiao family could despise her." Ning Shu grabbed the servant's arm and asked coldly, "Where are they?" "I'm asking you a question." The servant was frightened by Ning Shu's cold face. Just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted by a roar. Su ran, Ning Shu picked his ears. The voice sounded a little familiar. Ning Shu turned his head and saw Xiao Yan, whose face was still bruised. Xiao Yan walked quickly to Ning Shu. Ning Shu roared, "Su ran, you vicious woman. What's wrong with the servant? Are you starting to abuse the servant now?" Ning Shu sneered. Seeing such a perverted person, he did not want to open his eyes. Now, she had even accused her of being evil. What the fuck was this? Xiao Yan looked at Ning Shu with undisguised disgust and hatred in his eyes. As long as he thought of the doctor's words, Xiao Yan wanted to tear Ning Shu apart. His beloved woman suffered because of such a vicious, greedy and hypocritical woman. Such a person could not even be compared to Su Meng's hair. When the servant saw Xiao Yan, he quickly said, young master, and young miss are in the hospital. Now master and madam are in the hospital." Chapter 78. When Xiao Yan heard that the 2 babies were sent to the hospital, his face instantly changed and his eyes turned red. Ning Shu roared, "What did you do this time?" Ning Shu was speechless. "What did I do? What did I do? I don't even know why." Su ran, "If anything happens to the 2 children, I will bury you with them." Xiao Yan looked at Ning Shu with hatred, turned around and got into the car to go to the hospital. Ning Shu was in a mess. He covered his heart and felt very tired. Why did he feel that the people in this world were so unreasonable and so willful? "Which hospital?" Ning Shu asked the servant lightly. When the servant saw how disgusted the eldest young master was with the young madam, she looked at Ning Shu with even more disdain. It was the same no matter where one bowed to the superior and stepped on the inferior. The servant said unhappily, "I don't know which hospital she is in." Ning Shu looked at the servant indifferently, "I ask you, which hospital? Even if I have no status in this family, I still have the qualification to dismiss you." "In the central hospital," the servant quickly said. Ning Shu planned to go and see what the situation was. The 2 children were sent to the hospital at the same time. Even Su Debao, who had a high IQ, was sent to the hospital. When Ning Shu arrived at the central hospital, he heard Su Meng's heart-wrenching cry from far away in the corridor. Ning Shu's heart moved. Were the 2 babies going to die? Impossible. These 2 were important tools to improve the relationship between Xiao Yan and Su Meng. That's right, tools. In Ning Shu's view, these 2 children were Su Meng's golden fingers. Su Debao was the breadwinner of the family, and Su Xiaobao was the one who acted spoiled and cute. The 2 children could clear the obstacles in front of Su Meng. Before they married into the family, they had already won the favor of Su Meng's parents-in-law and helped Su Meng get rid of his annoying wife with his father. This was not a child. This was a complete freak. It was too illogical. Ning Shu walked over and saw Su Meng, who was usually delicate and pretty, on the verge of fainting from crying in Xiao Yan's arms. Xiao Yan kept comforting Su Meng, looking anxious. Old Master Xiao and Madame Xiao were sitting on the chairs, unable to sit still. Ning Shu walked over and successfully received everyone's disgusted gazes. Ning Shu felt very bitter in his heart. It was not easy to be hated by everyone. What are you doing here? Xiao Yan raised his chin and looked at Ning Shu. Don't mess with me, or you'll have to bear the consequences. Ning Shu frowned. She really didn't know how to communicate with these people. Couldn't they talk nicely? They were always yelling and acting cool and arrogant. Ning Shu really couldn't stand it. Su Meng, who was leaning in Xiao Yan's arms, looked at Ning Shu with red eyes and said sadly, Su Ran, the child is innocent. If you have any dissatisfaction, you can come at me. I just hope that you won't hurt my child. Ning Shu, can you get out of the arms of someone else's husband? Don't you think it's disgusting to lean in the arms of someone else's husband and say this? Ning Shu said indifferently. What did I do to your child? If she had done something to bear such a crime, Ning Shu wouldn't say anything. But now, she didn't even know what had happened. She was confused and these people were blaming her. He was about to be driven crazy by others. Su Meng stared at Ning Shu with her eyes wide open. Her big almond-shaped eyes were clear and innocent. She emotionally withdrew from Xiao Yan's arms, tears streaming down her face. Don't come near me. I just want my child to be fine. Xiao Yan looked at Su Meng with pity and tried to hold Su Meng. It's okay. Our child will be fine. Su Meng struggled in Xiao Yan's arms and cried, Don't touch me. If I get close to you, my child will be hurt. I don't want anything to happen to my child. Xiao Yan, please let me and my child go. Ning Shu, help, puff. Ning Shu supported herself against the wall with one hand and covered her heart with the other. She was really upset. The protagonist was really capricious and yelled in the hospital. She didn't care much about the two children and could leave them with the Xiao family. She didn't need to worry about the two children at all. Su Meng, who was already a mother of two children, was still living like a young girl. Now she was acting like this again. Ning Shu felt that she was going to vomit blood. Alright, stop fooling around. Old Master Xiao spoke up to stop the two people's tragic drama. Xiao Yan comforted Su Meng helplessly and asked Mr. Xiao, Father, what's wrong with the two children? Ning Shu almost laughed out loud. She was so focused on acting out the scene of life and death with Su Meng that she didn't even know what was going on with her own child. He felt drunk. Mrs. Xiao glared at Ning Shu, who couldn't help laughing, and said to Ning Shu angrily, It's all your fault. Why did you want to eat abalone? You greedy woman. Ning Shu, what does it have to do with me? Mother, what's going on? Xiao Yan stared at Ning Shu viciously. Sure enough, Su Ran, you are really vicious. You won't even let the children go. It's all this woman's fault. She wanted to eat abalone. At noon, the two children ate too much abalone and couldn't digest it. Now they came to the hospital to vomit. Mrs. Xiao glared at Ning Shu. Mr. Xiao also said, Don't have abalone in the house in the future. Ning Shu, Mama, I want to go home. The people here are all crazy. Xiao Yan looked at Ning Shu with disgust. Ning Shu sneered and said, I wasn't the one who forced them to eat it. I wasn't the one who forced them to eat it. Or was it me who poisoned the abalone? What did it have to do with her? You're still quibbling. If you didn't scare Xiao Bao to tears, the children wouldn't have indigestion. Mrs. Xiao sneered and said. Ning Shu, she felt so tired. Why were the people in this world so crazy? Where was their logic? Where was their worldview? They blamed everything on her, but these people still acted as if it was natural. They were crazy. Ning Shu felt very bitter. He felt like a normal person living in a crazy world. What were these people's brains used for? Ning Shu thought for a while and understood. She guessed that when she went out and said that she wanted to eat abalone, the two mischievous children didn't want to let her eat it. Then, they ate it themselves and didn't want to leave any for this despicable woman. Children were prone to indigestion. Now, these two children were in the hospital. The abalone was innocent. She was innocent too. No one saw the intentions behind these two children's actions. They were pranks and malicious thoughts. Ning Shu felt that he deserved it for courting death like this. Su Ran, I won't allow you to hurt my children again. Xiao Yan looked at Ning Shu. I want to divorce you, evil woman. Dream on. He wouldn't divorce her even if he died. Chapter 79. When Ning Shu heard Xiao Yan talk about divorce, she immediately objected. If she divorced Xiao Yan, her task would be over. She had put up with these idiots for so long, and she couldn't lose the task. At least, she couldn't break off the marriage with Xiao Yan in this world. Looking at the arrogant Xiao Yan, Ning Shu said fiercely, if you say this again, I'll beat you. Ning Shu's words stunned everyone. Xiao Yan's face swelled to a purple hue. Su Ran, you vicious woman, I'll never fall in love with you. Don't try to bind me with marriage. Xiao Yan roared at Ning Shu, I will never fall in love with you in this life or the next life, you vicious woman. Ning Shu was almost deafened by Xiao Yan's voice. He picked his ears and said, keep your voice down. You're so noisy that you'll disturb the vomit-inducing doctor inside. If you don't pay attention, the vomit-inducing tube will puncture your baby's stomachs. Xiao Yan's heart swelled because of Ning Shu's words, but he had to worry about the two babies, so he looked depressed as if he was constipated. You. Mrs. Xiao pointed at Ning Shu and said, you're threatening people. Mr. Xiao also looked at Ning Shu unkindly. Obviously, he thought that Ning Shu had offended the dignity of men and his son. Su Meng walked to Xiao Yan, and Ning Shu said, cousin, Xiao Yan doesn't love you. Why are you so persistent? You want to stay in a marriage without love. A marriage without love is a grave. Ning Shu looked at Su Meng coldly and said, I have a grave, but you can only die in the wild. You don't even have a grave. You. Su Meng stamped her feet angrily and said, I'm just trying to persuade you because we're both women. Don't be ungrateful. Can you not steal other people's husbands for the sake of women? Ning Shu was about to kneel down in front of Su Meng. This logic, this worldview. Ning Shu felt that he was quite powerful when he stood beside someone else's husband and advised them to leave if there was no love between them. However, he was still disgusted by these people. Don't say anything more, Su Ran. I'll prepare the document. You just need to sign it. Xiao Yan seemed to be very dignified and said in a very high and mighty manner. At this moment, the two vomit-inducing children were pushed out. They were lying on the hospital beds, their breathing shallow. Their faces were pale, and even their eyes were dim. Everyone no longer cared about the topic of divorce. They all surrounded the child on the hospital bed. Su Meng looked at the two precious eggs and cried loudly as if she was about to die. Ning Shu glanced at the side and then left. She didn't have time to waste on these idiots. Ning Shu only had one thought in her mind. She wanted to leave this world as soon as possible, even if the points were a little less. She really didn't want to stay in this world anymore. This world was really too much. It completely revolved around the main character. If the main character felt that it was right, then it was right. If the main character said that it was wrong, then it was wrong. In such a willful and unreasonable world, normal people would be driven crazy. Ning Shu was sitting in a coffee shop. She was waiting for someone. Ning Shu raised her wrist and looked at her watch. Damn, half an hour had already passed. She didn't have any sense of time at all. The person she was waiting for was late. After looking around the coffee shop, Ning Shu walked over. "Sorry, something came up at the company. That's why I'm late." The man sitting opposite her, Ning Shu, apologized. Ning Shu laughed in her heart. If it was the female lead, would you be willing to let her wait for so long? Alright, if it wasn't the female lead's life, then there was no need to be pretentious. The man sitting opposite her was a male supporting character. He looked elegant and noble, and his entire body was filled with a bone-deep gentleness and elegance. However, Ning Shu could only see the words "gentle supporting male lead" written on his forehead in gold. In this day and age, if there was nothing wrong with you, you couldn't be the male lead. For example, the incomparably Chinibu Xiao Yan had become the male lead, and Li Xiuwen had become the male supporting character. Elegant, gentle, gentlemanly. These were the qualities that a good man should have. Why did a pair of lame eyes fall for that? Xiao Yan. Li Xiuwen was wearing a silver suit. Sitting opposite Ning Shu, he was as beautiful as a painting. His fingers were long and slender, and his knuckles were smooth. Why were the male lead and male supporting characters so lame that they fell for the female lead? Could it be that all men liked naive and muddle-headed women? Was it fun to follow behind the muddle-headed female lead and clean up her mess? You are. Li Xiuwen looked at Ning Shu. His voice was as gentle as water, clear and pleasant to the ears. Ning Shu felt that it was impossible for the other party not to know who she was. She was the female lead's love rival, and Xiao Yan was his love rival. Ning Shu didn't think that Li Xiuwen wouldn't know who she was. What's there to pretend for? We're both revolutionary comrades who want but can't get what we want. We're walking further and further down the path of cannon fodder. Ning Shu coughed, cleared her throat, and went straight to the point. I'm Xiao Yan's wife, I'm Ning. Su ran. Li Xiuwen nodded, and looked at the watch on his wrist. Why are you looking for me? I think I'll be leaving. She made him wait for half an hour, and he had to leave in less than 5 minutes. Ning Shu took back her evaluation of Li Xiuwen. What gentlemanly! What gentlemanly! They were all shit. They were all aimed at the female lead. Don't, handsome. You're leaving so soon. You didn't make me wait for half an hour for nothing. At least let me say something. Ning Shu's words were a bit impolite. Li Xiuwen's slanted eyebrows frowned. In that case, please say it. Ning Shu sensed that Li Xiuwen's attitude towards her was a bit impatient. Su Meng must have said something bad about her in front of this guy. She must have said that she was vicious and hypocritical. Ning Shu could recite all of these words. I'm here to cooperate with you. Ning Shu said directly. I know you like Su Meng, but Su Meng gave birth to 2 children for Xiao Yan. The 2 men are so outstanding. I think Su Meng will have difficulty choosing. Li Xiuwen looked at Ning Shu with a faint smile. Then how should we cooperate? Fuck, he agreed so quickly. Ning Shu saw the smile on Li Xiuwen's face. What was the meaning of this fake smile? Ning Shu originally wanted to leave, but thinking that there was someone even more disgusting than Li Xiuwen, Ning Shu held back. She talked to Li Xiuwen and said, if the Xiao family is gone, do you think Su Meng will choose Xiao Yan? Li Xiuwen's eyes flashed. He shook his head and said, Miss Su, we can't cooperate at all. I won't do anything that will make Meng suffer. Ning Shu clutched her chest and almost spat out a mouthful of blood. She had completely forgotten that the supporting male character was also a man who knelt under the halo of the female lead, Mary Sue. He was the type who was heavily poisoned. He was incomparably passionate and would not stop until he died. Ning Shu looked at Li Xiuwen. How noble was this? Li Xiuwen looked at the woman opposite him. Her expression became very interesting. Her expression was so complicated that he could not describe it. Chapter 80. Ning Shu felt that her head had been kicked by a donkey, that's why she was so stupid to work with the supporting male lead. Could it be that idiocy was contagious, and she had already been infected? Speaking of the supporting male lead, Li Xiuwen, his qualifications were good, his family background was good, and he had good looks. Once he saw the female lead, he fell in love with her. When he was studying abroad, he met the pregnant Su Meng, and then took care of her until she came back. After she came back, Su Meng and Xiao Yan were together. Li Xiuwen became the female lead's good brother, and often made the male lead jealous. What kind of moral integrity was this? Li Xiuwen looked at the woman opposite him. Her expression changed a lot, and he didn't know what she was thinking. Li Xiuwen stretched out his smooth fingers and knocked on the table, making a rhythmic knocking sound, which woke up Ning Shu, who was in her own imagination. What do you want to say? Sorry, I have to go first. Li Xiuwen's expression was a little gloomy. Ning Shu guessed that the other party didn't want to see her, this evil woman. Could she just kill those people, and then the mission would be considered complete? Ding! Ning Shu's brain suddenly rang with the sound of electric current. This feeling was too familiar, it had been a long time since she heard the system's voice. What the player thought is not valid, it doesn't conform to the rules of this world. Player, please dispel this thought. The original owner's soul was to change her life, and not to wake up in a women's prison. The system's voice was mechanical and cold, but for some reason, Ning Shu felt that she was ridiculed by the system. Li Xiuwen looked at the woman opposite him again. Her face was twisted, and Li Xiuwen felt that this woman was definitely crazy. Li Xiuwen shook his head and stood up, preparing to leave. He thought to himself, Xiao Yan's wife is actually crazy. When Li Xiuwen stood up, Ning Shu finally reacted. She stretched out her hand and grabbed Li Xiuwen's arm, pulling him back to sit down. She said coldly, I say, what do you mean by this? I haven't even said anything, and you keep making a fuss about leaving. You've had enough. It won't be too late to leave after I'm done talking. Ning Shu looked at Li Xiuwen and said directly, I want to work with you to destroy the Xiao family. I'll give you half of the stolen money as fast as possible. Li Xiuwen raised his eyebrows. Why should I cooperate with you? And what right do you have to talk about cooperation? And you actually want half of the Xiao family's huge corporation. Li Xiu was just short of saying, can you be a little more shameless? Ning Shu sneered. She took out a stack of RMB from her bag and slammed it on the table. I have money. Let's cooperate. But I don't think I gained anything. Li Xiuwen shrugged. I spent so much effort to destroy the Xiao family, and in the end, I have to give half of it to you. Ning Shu almost spat on the handsome face in front of him. He said very unhappily, don't be unsatisfied. You can get a girl. You got Su Meng. What else do you want? You can get Su Meng. What else are you not satisfied with? She was supposed to be the female lead, but in the end, she ended up with a supporting male character like you. You've really hit the jackpot. You've definitely defied the heavens and changed your fate. You've changed your life as a supporting male character, but you still aren't satisfied. Didn't you get Xiao Yan too? Li Xiuwen said indifferently. Pfft. Ning Shu almost spat on Li Xiuwen's face this time. He spat out all the coffee in his mouth. Half of it was because he was shocked, and the other half was because he was disgusted. He. Ning Shu's mouth twitched and he sneered. He collected all the RMB on the table and put it in his bag. Li Xiuwen saw Ning Shu's actions and asked in surprise, aren't we discussing how to destroy the Xiao family? You look like you're planning to leave. Handsome, I'm leaving first. Ning Shu said expressionlessly. You deserve to be a supporting male character for the rest of your life. Li Xiuwen blocked in front of Ning Shu. Sit down. We're discussing. Take out all the money in your bag. Let me see how much money you have. No. Ning Shu said righteously. It's not safe to take it out. I'm afraid that someone will steal my money. Li Xiuwen looked at Ning Shu as if he was looking at a lunatic. In the end, Ning Shu and Li Xiuwen reluctantly reached an agreement. Why was it reluctantly? The supporting male character, this bastard, actually wanted to reduce her benefits to 10%. He was just casually giving her a little. Ning Shu couldn't tolerate this at all. If he could get the beauty, even if he lost all his family assets, he would still have profited. In the end, Ning Shu used all kinds of methods and finally reached 40% of the benefits. Friendly reminder, don't find a shell company to fish for her. In front of Su Meng, you still have to pay attention to your pure and innocent image. Ning Shu patted Li Xiuwen's shoulder and left. Ning Shu returned to the Xiao family. The house was very quiet. Ning Shu felt very happy. The two elders of the Xiao family stayed in the hospital to take care of Jin's son, and Xiao Yan didn't come back either. Ning Shu's liver and lungs were very happy, but Xiao Yan felt very sad. His children were lying on the bed like this. Looking at Su Meng's red and swollen eyes, Xiao Yan felt that if he didn't do anything, he wouldn't be worthy of being a man. Xiao Yan felt that the Su family was very annoying now. They had made so much money from the Xiao family, but they still raised such a vicious woman like Su Ran. Especially Su Bo, that old bastard, actually killed Su Meng's parents. He had to get justice for Su Meng. In the end, Xiao Yan still cooperated with the plot. But this time, there was a shadow in Su Bo's heart. He didn't take out all of the Su family's money. He kept some of his family's assets. He still didn't believe that the Xiao family would do such a thing to their teammate. When Mrs. Su called Ning Shu to tell him about this, Ning Shu just kept silent and didn't say anything. Since the Su family trusted the Xiao family and Xiao Yan so much, then let the Su family suffer a loss. Ning Shu didn't want to spend so much effort to protect the Su family, only to be pushed to Su Meng by his brainless brother. That would be a terrible thing. Ning Shu asked Li Xiuwen to act quickly. Now Xiao Yan had already acted. When Xiao Yan was at his proudest, when he was full of himself, he would give him a blow. Su Debao and Su Xiaobao, who were sick, took advantage of their illness to act coquettishly and play cute. They tried their best to bring the two together and cultivate the relationship between Su Meng and Xiao Yan. For a time, the ward was filled with the voices of the two children and pink bubbles of love. The two elders looked at each other and smiled. The picture was harmonious and beautiful, like a loving family. Every time Xiao Yan looked at Su Meng with a burning gaze. When Su Meng took something, he deliberately held Su Meng's hand, making Su Meng blush. Especially in a hidden place in the hospital, the two hugged and kissed sweetly. Not far away, there were two children watching with a mischievous expression. Chapter 81. Su Meng and Xiao Yan's relationship quickly heated up. They broke through the last line of defense and rolled around together. As for Ning Shu, the official wife, she lived alone in a spacious house. Even her voice echoed. However, Ning Shu was very comfortable. As long as the two of them did not do it in front of her, Ning Shu could pretend that she did not know anything. When Ning Shu saw Li Xiuwen's dark face, she was gloating in her heart. Ning Shu had only experienced 2 worlds before this. In the first world, she was lucky enough to meet the perverted genetic scientist and school doctor with the codename Madman. In the second world, she used the identity of a princess and solved the problem with a whip. She had not experienced a business war yet. Therefore, Ning Shu participated in the plan to destroy the Xiao family. Ning Shu was now trying to learn as much as possible. If she had the ability to build a business empire, she would not need to cooperate with Li Xiuwen. Ning Shu had to learn. When he saw Ning Shu, Li Xiuwen's face was very ugly. Seeing that Ning Shu acted as if nothing had happened, he could not help but say, "Your husband is cheating. Why don't you do anything?" Ning Shu was also speechless. The person you liked was sleeping with someone else. What was the use of being angry with me? Didn't I tell you to speed up? With the speed of their passion, it is normal for them to roll around together. If there is a first time, there will be a second time. There will be many times in the future. You will get used to it. Ning Shu comforted Li Xiaowen. In the beginning, Su Meng did not accept Xiao Yan. Although she gave birth to 2 children for him, Su Meng was still very reserved. Now that her relationship with Xiao Yan was progressing smoothly, they would definitely deepen their relationship. The living room, the sofa, the kitchen, could be the scene of passion. Ning Shu comforted Li Xiaowen as if he was looking at a green-haired turtle. Li Xiaowen was not comforted by Ning Shu. Instead, his face became even uglier. He looked at Ning Shu in disbelief. "Your husband is with another woman." "You still," Li Xiaowen didn't know how to describe Ning Shu. He tapped his fingers on the table in frustration. "You love your Xiao Yan so much that you don't even care when he's with other women." "Love my ass," she loves Xiao Yan. Even a fool could tell that she didn't love Xiao Yan. Did it mean that everything she did had to be related to love? Why didn't she say that she was interested in the Xiao family's money? Alright, the supporting male lead had already been provoked to the point of insanity. Ning Shu only said, "Let's act quickly. Otherwise, their relationship will only get better and better. You know." Ning Shu's Li Xiaowen raised his eyebrows, looking a little wretched. Li Xiaowen took a deep breath and pointed at the door. "Get lost." Ning Shu shook his head and walked away. When he returned to the Xiao family, the servant told Ning Shu that someone was waiting for him in the living room. Ning Shu walked into the living room and saw the Su family sitting on the sofa waiting for her. Seeing Ning Shu, Madame Su forced a smile on her face and asked, "Ran Air, how have you been recently?" Ning Shu's Madame Su smiled and said, "Very good." Since the last time Ning Shu went to the Su family and beat up the original owner's brother, Ning Shu never returned to the Su family. It felt like they would never talk to each other again. Now that she suddenly came looking for him, Ning Shu thought for a moment and knew that it was about the cooperation. He would rather believe Xiao Yan than his daughter. What was the use of looking for her now? It was useless. Ahem. Su Bo coughed and said, "Ran Air, you knew about this beforehand?" Su Bo's eyes were a little complicated, and then he said with a little decadence, "This time the Su family really suffered a great loss. Our family's assets are not even 1/10 of what it was before." Ning Shu faintly said, "Oh," without any expression. The situation now was much better than in the plot. The original Su family was fragmented. At that time, Su Bo directly took Su Lan and ran away, leaving the original owner and Madame Su behind. The 2 weak women became prostitutes. It could be said that she, a vicious cannon fodder, was reduced to such a situation. It could be said that she vented her hatred, but Su Debao still came to the nightclub to humiliate her. So, was it really good for such a small child to go to the nightclub? And because he was the son of President Xiao Yan, Su Debao made things difficult for him, and the nightclub refused to accept her. She grew up spoiled and had no means to make a living. In the end, Su Ran was poor, and died of a heart disease. It felt like she was drunk. Can you tell Xiao Yan to borrow some money from the Xiao family, so that the Su family has some liquid funds? Su Bo said. Ning Shu directly rolled his eyes. They were clearly messing with her, and they still wanted to lend her money. Even if Xiao Yan was a moron, he wouldn't lend her money. He was deliberately sending her to the Xiao clan to test their attitude. Didn't Dad say that women shouldn't be involved in business matters? Ning Shu directly refused. Ning Shu felt that the original owner was quite naive. She thought that by protecting the Su family, they wouldn't end up in the plot. With the support of her family, they wouldn't be so miserable. She didn't think that Su Bo didn't care about them at all. Hearing Su Ran's refusal, Su Bo's face suddenly became ugly, and said, "You were born in the Su family, and the Su family gave you glory and wealth. Now they want you to pay a little, and you refuse. You have to think about it, without the Su family, it will be difficult for you to move forward in the Xiao family." Mrs. Su looked at her husband, and then looked at Ning Shu. In the end, she sighed and didn't say anything. Su Lan said to Su Bo, "Dad, I told you not to beg her. Su Ran only has herself in her heart. She's selfish and vicious." Ning Shu looked up at Su Lan and said expressionlessly, "You either shut up, or I'll beat you until you shut up. Who do you think you are? Why are you shouting at me? If you have the guts, go find Xiao Yan, who set you up. You're as cowardly as a woman. Now that the Su family has no money, you can go sell yourself." Su Lan's face instantly turned red. She clenched her fists and looked at Ning Shu with bloodshot eyes. She roared, "Su Ran, I dare you to insult me one more time. Even if I go ask for a favor, I won't come back to beg a vicious woman like you." Su Lan turned around and was about to leave, but she was stopped by Su Bo. Su Lan said with grievance and anger, "Dad, let's go. Let Su Ran be complacent. Listen to what she said. She doesn't have the Su family in her heart, and she doesn't have me, her brother. She only has herself in her heart." Hearing Su Lan's accusations, Ning Shu couldn't help but think that the men kneeling under the halo of Mary Su were all so self-righteous and willful. They always stood on the moral high ground and criticized others, but never reflected on their own behavior. Su Lan always said that she didn't have him as her brother in her heart. Then what about Su Lan, her brother, who was biased to Su Meng, and treated her sister like an enemy? Haha. Chapter 82. There were so many evil things in this world that Ning Shu had the urge to destroy the world. Hearing Su Lan's righteous accusation, Ning Shu was speechless. What a twisted world. Ning Shu couldn't bear it anymore. People who had never eaten the food of mortals and had never come into contact with society were just so willful. "Dad, I can't do anything about this. You should go back. Don't you still have some money? You can make a comeback." The current situation was much better than in the plot. If they were still not satisfied, it could only be said that people were really too greedy. "Dad, I'll say, shut up. You're not allowed to speak, or I'll beat you until you can't speak." Su Lan was interrupted by Ning Shu as soon as she opened her mouth. Su Lan looked at Ning Shu with resentment and fear. Ning Shu didn't pay attention to Su Lan's eyes. In Ning Shu's eyes, Su Lan wasn't a man at all. He didn't have the responsibility that a man should have. He was a person with the same virtue as Xiao Yan. Su Bo heard his daughter's rejection again and his old face couldn't hold it anymore. He glared at Ning Shu and was about to leave when he suddenly heard a servant shout, "Master and Madam are back. Hurry up and come out to greet them." In a short while, 2 rows of servants stood neatly from the door to the living room. Such a big lineup. First, old Master Xiao got down from his body, followed by Xiao Yan holding Su Xiaobao and Su Meng holding Su Debao. Stepping on the carpet, the family of 6 slowly walked in. Old Master Xiao was incomparably dignified, Madame Xiao was graceful and luxurious, and Xiao Yan was holding a little princess in a fluffy dress. Xiao Yan's peerless beauty matched with the little princess's cuteness and sweetness like an angel. Just by looking at them, one would feel that they were the best things in the world. Ning Shu's mouth twitched. They were quite good at acting. Ning Shu looked at Su Meng. Her face was white with a little rosy, and her whole body seemed to be shrouded in the rosy clouds. Her whole body was full of charm. It seemed that she was well nourished by Xiao Yan. When Xiao Yan saw Ning Shu in the living room, his handsome face immediately showed disdain, disgust, and all kinds of negative emotions. When Su Meng saw Ning Shu, a trace of uneasiness flashed across her face. However, she immediately strengthened the belief in her heart. She and Xiao Yan truly loved each other, and Xiao Yan did not love Su Ran. "Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Xiao." Su Bo greeted Old Master Xiao and Mrs. Xiao enthusiastically. Raising his eyelids, Old Man Xiao glanced at Su Bo and faintly said, "I'm sorry for the lack of hospitality. The child has just been discharged from the hospital, and he needs someone to take care of him." Su Bo's face stiffened. He forced a smile and said, "The child is more important." Su Lan looked at Su Meng and asked, "Cousin, are the two children okay?" Su Meng immediately revealed a charming smile, but with a trace of lingering fear, she said, "It's all right. Come, quickly greet your uncle." Su Meng greeted the two children. Su Debao and Su Xiaobao called out crisply, "Uncle." A smile appeared on Su Lan's face, and he looked very excited. He repeatedly said, "Don't get sick again in the future. Don't make your mother anxious." Su Xiaobao secretly looked at Ning Shu and said in a childish and naive voice, "Uncle is different from her." Ning Shu looked at the side and was also drunk. He was really drunk. Looking at Su Lan's actions, Ning Shu felt that there was no one in the world more speechless than Su Lan. His own father was humble to others, but he couldn't see it. He was incomparably kind to the two children. This kind of person was lucky to be born in a rich family. If he was born in a lower class of society, he would have died countless times. Mrs. Su, who was standing beside Ning Shu, saw this scene and was so angry that she almost fainted. Her son was actually fawning over the little bitch and the little bitch's children. Ning Shu reached out and held Mrs. Su's hand. He could completely understand Mrs. Su's bad feeling. Ning Shu glanced at the two children. Su Debao and Su Xiaobao immediately put on a frightened look and hugged Xiao Yan's legs, as if Ning Shu was going to do something to them. Xiao Yan immediately protected his children, looked around at the Su family, and said disdainfully and condescendingly, "Since you are all here, I'll tell you the matter. Su Ran and I." Xiao Yan pointed at Ning Shu and said, "I want to divorce her. We'll divorce now." Hearing that Xiao Yan wanted to divorce, the Xiao family didn't have any reaction, but the Su family was in an uproar, especially Mrs. Su, who directly asked Mrs. Xiao, "Why do you suddenly want to divorce? What did my daughter do wrong? Even if you want to divorce, you have to give us an explanation." Su Bo's face was also livid. He was counting on his daughter to get some working capital from the Xiao family, but now his daughter was directly kicked out of the family. At this time, Su Bo really understood that the Xiao family deliberately took over 90% of the Su family's assets. Su Bo looked a little decadent for a moment. Ning Shu's face was indifferent, without any expression. He didn't cry, didn't make a fuss, and didn't even have a sad expression. Su Meng said to Ning Shu, "Although there are many misunderstandings between us, I still hope that you can find someone who loves you. I once wanted to take revenge, but now." Su Meng and Xiao Yan looked at each other and smiled. They held hands and said, "There are better things in the world. Cousin, you should also let go and find a new life. Your persistence is very painful for everyone." Ning Shu felt his stomach churning. "Please don't be so disgusting." The Su family was cheated by the Xiao family, and now they said that they didn't want to take revenge and wanted to live a happy life together. Let her quit and let them be. Ning Shu felt that his worldview was broken into dumplings. "I absolutely don't agree with the divorce," Madame Su said with a pale face. She glared at Su Meng with deep hatred in her eyes. Xiao Yan blocked Madame Su's eyes from looking at Su Meng so that his beloved woman wouldn't be frightened. He sneered and said, "Like mother like daughter, both of you are equally vicious. You must divorce, even if you don't want to." Su Lan frowned and said to Madame Su, "There is no love between sister and brother-in-law. Mom, if you force the two of them to be together, it will only cause more misfortune and pain. You." Madame Su looked at her calendar in disbelief, and her body staggered twice. Slap, slap, Ning Shu slapped Su Lan twice. Su Lan looked at Ning Shu with resentment and said, "You hit me again." Su Meng pointed at Ning Shu and said, how can you hit people?" Then she looked at Su Lan with comforting eyes. Xiao Yan saw this scene and remembered the scene when he was hit by Ning Shu in the hospital. This time, he felt as if he was hit in the face. It was very painful. Xiao Yan looked at Ning Shu with red eyes. Chapter 83. Ning Shu listened to these people talking about love, love your sister. At this time, in this world, except for love, there was no responsibility, no responsibility. Ning Shu's heart was filled with anger. When she came to this world, she had been enduring this group of idiots. She didn't want to argue with them, but in the end, she would directly kill them. It was too irritable. Ning Shu slapped Su Lan a few more times, and then directly kicked Su Lan away, and then walked in front of Xiao Yan with a cold face. Xiao Yan was much taller than Ning Shu. In Xiao Yan's eyes, she could definitely be regarded as petite, but Xiao Yan looked at Ning Shu who was walking towards her step by step. Her face was extremely cold, and her eyes were filled with a dense and awe-inspiring murderous aura. This kind of Su Ran unexpectedly made Xiao Yan's heart tighten. He involuntarily took 2 steps back, and then realized that he couldn't show his fear in front of such a vicious woman. He straightened his chest and sneered, "You are so vicious to your own brother, Xiao family will never tolerate such a vicious woman like you." Ning Shu looked at Xiao Yan and directly swept her leg towards Xiao Yan, making Xiao Yan fall to the ground. Although her fighting skills were at the level of trash according to the system's evaluation, this kind of sudden attack still had some effect. "You!" Su Meng pointed at Ning Shu and opened her mouth wide. Ning Shu quickly gave Su Meng a slap in the face, and then backhanded another slap in the face. Su Meng's face was swollen, and she stared at Ning Shu with wide eyes. Xiao Yan, who was suddenly tripped and fell to the ground, was dizzy. Seeing this vicious woman actually hit Su Meng, he wanted to get up. Ning Shu stretched out her foot and fiercely stepped on Xiao Yan's chest, and it was the position of his heart. Suddenly, Xiao Yan's face became pale, and he took a deep breath. "Wah, wah, Grandma, I'm scared," the 2 children shouted at the top of their lungs. Obviously, they were really scared. Even Su Debao looked at Ning Shu with a horrified face. Ning Shu said coldly, "Shut up." Ning Shu's voice was filled with murderous intent, which immediately shut the 2 children's mouths and kept burping. Su Debao looked at Ning Shu with gloomy eyes. His eyes were filled with resentment as he looked at Ning Shu. "How dare you? What are you doing?" Madame Xiao pointed at Ning Shu and screamed. The Su family members were all stunned by Ning Shu's valiance. Old Master Xiao looked at Ning Shu sternly and coldly. "You're out of control. You're treating the Xiao family as nothing." The old couple's faces were livid, especially when they saw that the 2 children were scared out of their wits by Ning Shu. They felt distressed and angry. Ning Shu faintly clapped his hands and mercilessly stepped on Xiao Yan's chest, which made Xiao Yan's face paler and he groaned. Obviously, she was a woman, but why did she have so much strength? When she stepped on his chest, it felt like his heart was going to explode. What made Xiao Yan even more unbearable was that his dignity was being dismembered. Who was he, Xiao Yan? This woman. How dare she? Xiao Yan's heart was filled with murderous intent. Ning Shu retracted his leg and looked around at the people. When they met Ning Shu's eyes, everyone felt their scalp tingle. "Whoever mentions divorce to me, I will kill him first." "You." Xiao Yan, who got up from the ground, had a murderous look in his eyes, which was exactly the same as Su Debao's. Su Meng covered her face and looked at Ning Shu as if she had committed a heinous crime. "You're hopeless." Xiao Yan didn't mention divorce at this time. He took Su Meng and the two children and left directly. There was a kind of determination to never return. Ning Shu sneered and looked at the backs of the four people. Don't think about returning to this villa in your life. The Su family also left with Su Lan, whose face was swollen like a pig's head. Su Bo was cold. What happened just now directly broke the relationship between the two families. The Su family was really declining. Mrs. Su looked at Ning Shu with worry in her eyes. Mr. and Mrs. Xiao looked at Ning Shu coldly and directly ignored Ning Shu. Their faces were full of reluctance to part with the two children. Ning Shu didn't care about the disgusted look of the two children at all. On this side, Xiao Yan took Su Meng and the two children back to Su Meng's small apartment. As soon as they entered the apartment, the two children hugged Xiao Yan's thigh and cried sadly. Xiao Yan had never seen the two children cry like this. The two children had always been very sensible. Xiao Yan's heart ached when they cried. He quickly hugged the two children and coaxed them. Then he saw Su Meng sitting on the sofa and covering her face. He walked over and hugged Su Meng. He gently touched Su Meng's face and said with gritted teeth, "Don't worry, I will avenge you. Su Ran bullied me several times. I will never let it go." The two children surrounded Xiao Yan. Su Debao wiped his tears and said, "Dad, will all women bully Mom in the future?" "Don't worry, there will be no future." Xiao Yan touched Su Debao's head and said coldly, "There will be no future. I will directly make Su Ran, that vicious woman, disappear. A woman who doesn't know what's good for her, if she doesn't want a divorce, she can go to hell." Su Debao's mouth curled up. Su Xiaobao smiled through tears. He hugged Xiao Yan's arm and kept shaking it. "Dad, you are so good." Su Meng's face was uneasy. She looked at him with her almond-like eyes and said, "This is not good. Mom, you are too kind. Such a vicious woman should be punished." Su Debao said like an old man. Yes, brother is right." Su Xiaobao nodded with an innocent and cute expression. Su Meng's face showed a smile. She pulled the wound on her face and immediately groaned in pain. This immediately made the other three nervous and took turns to comfort her. Su Meng felt very happy in her heart. Although there was still Su Ran in the middle, she firmly believed that her love with Xiao Yan would be complete and happy. Ning Shu didn't know about the chatter here. He got the news from Li Xiuwen that he was already taking action. It seemed that the other party had already taken the bait. This trap was not directly aimed at Xiao Yan, but at the people in Xiao Yan's company. Suddenly, Ning Shu felt a chill on his back and his heart jumped. This feeling was the same as when he was in the war in the last world. When he encountered danger, it was a kind of warning. Ning Shu narrowed his eyes. He guessed that he had angered Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan really wanted to turn him into his dead wife and then live together with Su Meng, loving each other and having a happy sex life. With the warning in his heart, Ning Shu directly stayed in the Xiao family and didn't go out at all. Every day, he listened to Mrs. Xiao scolding him indirectly. How unpleasant her words were, they went into Ning Shu's left ear and out the right ear. However, when Mrs. Xiao met Ning Shu's cold eyes, Mrs. Xiao was stunned. Regarding Xiao Yan leaving the Xiao family, Old Master Xiao and Mrs. Xiao both had a supportive attitude. Being ignored and disliked by her own husband, what could be worse than this punishment for a woman? She deserved to be disliked by her own husband. She deserved to be abandoned by her own husband. Mrs. Xiao looked at Ning Shu's back and thought fiercely in her heart. Chapter 84. Ning Shu clearly felt that the atmosphere in the Xiao family was not right recently. No matter what she did, she always felt that someone was spying on her. And it was a malicious spying, which made the hair on Ning Shu's back stand up. She felt a sense of danger approaching. Ning Shu dared to guarantee with the head of this body that it was definitely that bastard Xiao Yan's masterpiece. Ning Shu tried to find the malicious gaze, but she couldn't find it. Ning Shu could only be very careful. But what made Ning Shu happy was that she was close to destroying the Xiao family. Facing Mrs. Zhao's cynicism every day, Ning Shu treated it as the last bark of a dead dog. Ning Shu's lack of response made Mrs. Zhao hate Ning Shu even more. Every day, she tortured Ning Shu in different ways. For example, she didn't let the servants wash clothes for Ning Shu, didn't let Ning Shu cook for her. In short, she degraded Ning Shu's status to be lower than a servant's. She mocked Ning Shu as a hen that couldn't lay eggs in front of her. Ning Shu was speechless. She had once broken an egg. Mrs. Zhao was deliberately rubbing on Ning Shu's wound. Every time she heard such words, this body would show a sense of hatred and sadness. That was to say, the person facing Mrs. Zhao now was Ning Shu. If it was the original owner, she would have been driven crazy by Mrs. Zhao. It seemed that the current Mrs. Zhao hated her even more than in the plot. She guessed that what she did was worse than the original owner. And old man Zhao didn't see all of this, which was obviously a tacit agreement. Ning Shu didn't care about the attitude of the two elders of the Zhao family. She only cared about the people in this house who were full of malice towards her. Xiao Yan hadn't come back for almost half a month. This made the Zhao family look at Ning Shu with even more disdain. Ning Shu, that night, Ning Shu slept until the middle of the night. His heart was beating violently, and it was beating irregularly. His body was sweating profusely. When Ning Shu opened his eyes, he saw something shining above him. Under the moonlight, it reflected a cold light. Ning Shu's body was faster than his brain. He immediately rolled away. Then, he heard the dull sound of a knife hitting the bed. Damn, someone directly used a knife to cut her. Such a simple and crude method made Ning Shu really stunned for a moment. Ning Shu had thought of countless ways this person could deal with her, but she did not expect the other party to be so direct. The person in the dark failed and turned around to run. Ning Shu didn't even think about it. He quickly kicked the person and heard the sound of a body falling to the ground. Ning Shu quickly turned on the light and looked at the person on the ground. He saw that it was a woman with a big knife in her hand. It was the kind of knife used to chop bones. It was very big. If the knife was cut at the neck, her head would be separated from her body immediately. The sudden light made people very uncomfortable. The woman on the ground blocked it with her hand first. Before she could react, the knife in her hand was snatched away by Ning Shu. After snatching the knife, Ning Shu stepped on the woman on the ground. The middle-aged woman on the ground cried out in pain, breaking the silence of the night. Ning Shu dragged the woman by the collar and dragged her to the living room. After a while, a lot of people gathered in the living room. Even Mr. Zhao and Mrs. Zhao were alarmed. Mrs. Zhao looked at Ning Shu and said with dissatisfaction, "What are you doing in the middle of the night? Do you have to make everyone restless?" Ning Shu glanced at Mrs. Zhao coldly. He kicked the woman on the ground and said, "This person wants to kill me. I called the police." Ning Shu knew the woman who wanted to kill him. She seemed to be the cook of the Zhao family. When Mr. Zhao heard that Ning Shu had called the police, he immediately said sternly, "What are you doing? You actually called the police. You called the police for such a small matter. Don't you feel ashamed? You're fine. You're making a mountain out of a molehill." Ning Shu was speechless. Look at these words. If she hadn't dodged quickly, she would have been dead today. These people were just standing there and talking. Ning Shu found that this world was really twisted. There seemed to be no awareness of the law. The male lead seemed to be omnipotent and could solve anything. There was no such thing as the police. It seemed that the male lead didn't have anything to do with killing people. Instead, they felt that the male lead was very cool. This not long after, the police came whistling. Soon, the police came in. The leader asked, "Who called the police?" Ning Shu didn't say anything. Mr. Xiao looked at the room full of police and said with dissatisfaction, "Disturbing people in the middle of the night. That dignity, that arrogance, as if he was very amazing." Ning Shu really felt drunk. No matter how powerful the Xiao family was, in the end, they were still businessmen. In front of the national organization, this attitude of, "I'm the boss," really made Ning Shu drunk. He finally knew where Xiao Yan's personality came from. It was from the same bloodline. The leader was choked by Mr. Zhao's attitude. After all, he was a member of the national organization. It was impossible for him to be so humble to others. In addition, in the middle of the night, he was still in bed. The leader's face was very ugly. Ning Shu said, "I called the police. The person on the ground tried to kill me. This is the tool." Ning Shu said as he handed the knife to the leader. Ning Shu's face showed fear and hesitation. He said to the leader, "I don't know why she wants to kill me." The leader didn't care that the murderer was half dead. The victim was alive and kicking. He directly said to the team members, "Arrest her." The two police officers dragged the woman on the ground away. This attitude made Mr. Xiao very dissatisfied. He snorted and looked very dissatisfied. "Which police team are you from? How can you do things without any rules?" In Mr. Zhao's view, this cook was a member of the Xiao family. The other party's attitude was simply not putting the Xiao family in his eyes. The leader ignored Mr. Xiao. Ning Shu said, "You go with them and make a statement." Ning Shu was very cooperative. He went to the police station to make a statement. Before he left, he hinted to the police that a cook wouldn't be so bold. There must be something hidden. Ning Shu only came out of the police station when the sun rose after dealing with all the miscellaneous matters. He looked back at the police station. The fish couldn't get out of the abyss. The country's weapons couldn't be shown to others. Some of the country's powerful abilities wouldn't be shown to the world. In front of the country, the Xiao family was nothing. Ning Shu returned to the Xiao family. What he received was Mr. Zhao's extremely disgusted look. Mr. Zhao's attitude was as if he was controlling other people's fate. He didn't know why the Xiao family felt superior for no reason. He didn't know where this sense of superiority came from. Was it because Xiao Yan was the protagonist of this world? As soon as Ning Shu stepped into the Xiao family, Xiao Yan came back with the two babies. Xiao Yan had a smile on his face and his whole body was relaxed. Even the two children had a sweet smile on their faces. Chapter 85. When Xiao Yan and the two children walked into the Xiao family and saw Ning Shu, their faces froze at the same time, showing an incredible expression. Xiao Yan was an adult, so he immediately put away his disappointed look, but the two children pursed their lips and were about to cry, especially Su Xiaobao, who burst into tears. Su Xiaobao cried angrily and wiped his tears, looking at Ning Shu with annoyance and disappointment. Ning Shu raised his eyebrows. Why? Were they disappointed to see that she was not dead and was still here? Seeing the two precious eggs, Old Master Xiao and Madame Xiao immediately had smiles on their faces. They repeatedly said that they wanted to die. They missed them so much that their hearts ached. As soon as the two children came, the heavy atmosphere in the Xiao family was immediately dispelled. Su Xiaobao acted coquettishly and cutely while looking at Ning Shu with hatred. When Ning Shu's eyes met Xiao Yan's, Xiao Yan suddenly felt as if a bucket of ice water had been poured on him, and then he was frozen. That feeling of being seen through, as if Qin Haodong knew everything in his mind, Xiao Yan's heart was filled with anger and guilt. "You vicious woman, what have you done this time?" Xiao Yan roared at Ning Shu first. Ning Shu looked at him coldly and took a step forward. Xiao Yan unconsciously took a step back. Then he realized that he was afraid of this vicious and hypocritical woman, so he immediately shouted angrily, "You!" At this time, a man in a police uniform came in. It was the captain of the police team last night. When the captain came in, no one in the Xiao family greeted him. Captain Ning Shu asked, "Captain, did the woman confess?" The captain looked at Ning Shu and said, "Yes, she said that she wanted to kill you because she hated you." "Damn, what did she have against a female chef?" Ning Shu glanced at Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan was sitting on the sofa with a complacent look on his face. He looked at the police with contempt. Captain Ning Shu said, "According to her confession, it was because you always insulted her, said that her food was not delicious, and always picked on her. You even beat and scolded her, which made her hate you." Ning Shu was speechless. Xiao Yan sneered. "Su Ran, you're so vicious that you're torturing the servants." Ning Shu turned his head and looked at Xiao Yan. His heart was filled with murderous intent. He wanted to kill her and accuse her of being evil. He wondered what benefits Xiao Yan had given that chef. The captain didn't say anything and left after exchanging a few words with Ning Shu. Ning Shu looked at the complacent Xiao Yan. Ning Shu sneered. Seeing that Ning Shu was not dead, Xiao Yan was very disappointed. Now he didn't even want to look at Ning Shu and left with the two children. Although Mr. and Mrs. Xiao wanted to stay with the two children all the time, it was not safe for the two children to stay in the Xiao family because of the vicious woman Ning Shu. Ning Shu turned a blind eye to all kinds of eyes and silently waited for the Xiao family to collapse. This morning, the atmosphere in the Xiao family was very tense, like a bowstring that had been pulled close. Ning Shu, on the other hand, was eating breakfast leisurely. Mr. Xiao sat on the sofa, holding his walking stick tightly and looking frighteningly solemn. Mrs. Xiao saw that Ning Shu was still eating at this time, so she glared at Ning Shu. After a while, Xiao Yan came in with Su Meng and the two children. He asked Mr. Xiao, "Dad, what's going on? Why did the company's shares fall?" Mr. Xiao slammed his walking stick. "A large number of people have been selling shares since last night. I thought it could be controlled in the morning, but now it has fallen." Su Meng didn't understand business matters. Instead, she looked at Ning Shu and complained, "Su Ran, what time is it now? Why are you still eating so leisurely? Aren't you worried at all?" Ning Shu looked at Su Meng indifferently. "Oh, your face is fine. Don't talk nonsense in front of me." Su Meng was so scared that she covered her face with her hands. She stared at Ning Shu with her watery eyes full of accusation. Seeing that his mother was being bullied, Su Debao opened his arms in front of Su Meng and shouted, "Don't bully my mother, you vicious woman." Damn, what did she do? Why was she so vicious? She hadn't even started to be vicious. Su Meng squatted down and hugged Su Debao. "Mom is fine. With you protecting Mom, no one in the world can hurt Mom." "Yes, I will always protect Mom." Su Debao's face was firm. His face was shining with a holy light. He pointed at Ning Shu. "Don't even think about hurting my mother." Ning Shu was speechless. He seemed to have done something to Su Meng. The Xiao family's company collapsed. The stock market fell. Many shareholders directly blocked the company's door and made a scene. Some even threw feces into the company. The former overlord fell. Ning Shu was not surprised. Not only did Li Xiuwen want to deal with the Xiao family, but other opponents of the Xiao family also wanted to tear a piece of the Xiao family's flesh. It could be said that the result of many parties directly pulled down the Xiao family. Sure enough, this was a battlefield without spilling blood. Everything changed in an instant. The Xiao family was completely defeated. It was so fast that the Xiao family didn't even realize what was going on. They went bankrupt just like that. Mr. Xiao seemed to have aged 10 years. In the end, he had no choice but to announce the bankruptcy of the Xiao family. Since the Xiao family went bankrupt, this house belonged to the bank. The Xiao family could no longer live here. This made Mr. Xiao almost vomit blood. He actually had such an ending after dominating for a lifetime. The development of the matter was dazzling and unpredictable. Ning Shu truly felt that the supporting male lead was not bad compared to the male lead. He was even better than the male lead. He made the Xiao family go bankrupt so easily. Such an amazing person liked the female lead and desperately wanted to be the male lead. Just when the Xiao family was in a precarious situation, the captain directly led a group of policemen and detained Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan struggled violently and shouted, "Why are you arresting me? How can you arrest people for no reason? Is there any rule?" Old man Xiao said coldly. Although the Xiao family was in decline now, Old man Xiao was still unyielding. When facing the captain, he still had a high and mighty appearance. The captain expressionlessly took out a piece of paper and said, "This is the arrest warrant." The suspect, Xiao Yan, tried to hire someone to kill his wife. Now we want to take him back for interrogation. Xiao Yan's body stiffened. He looked at Ning Shu with hatred and roared, "You vicious woman, I won't let you go." Ning Shu suddenly felt that he was looking for trouble by arguing with such a person. Ning Shu ignored the roaring Xiao Yan and said to the captain, "Captain, look, he is still threatening me." As soon as Ning Shu said this, he immediately received several resentful eyes, including Su Meng and a large group of Xiao family members. "Cousin, how can you do this?" Su Meng took 2 steps back with an incredulous expression. "Do you hate Xiao Yan that much? Do you feel better after doing this? If you do this, Xiao Yan will hate you even more. He will never love you." Ning Shu didn't say anything and directly slapped Su Meng. "Shut up, or I will pull out your tongue." Chapter 86. In the end, Xiao Yan was still taken away. Putting aside the fact that Su Meng and Xiao Yan were separated by life and death, it was just like how Bai Suzhen was going to be locked up in Leifeng Pagoda. Su Meng chased after the police car for a long time and finally collapsed on the road. Su Debao and Su Xiaobao hugged each other and cried. Su Debao looked at Ning Shu with eyes full of gloomy hatred. Although Xiao Yan was taken away, for some reason, the 2 elders of the Xiao family seemed to be very sure that Xiao Yan was fine. This made Ning Shu feel that Old Man Xiao had some tricks up his sleeves. However, Old Man Xiao actually told Ning Shu to get Xiao Yan back, saying that it was just a misunderstanding. Hearing Old Man Xiao's words and attitude, Ning Shu was shocked. Treating the government agency as the servants of the Xiao family, they would let Xiao Yan go just because she said a word. Ning Shu didn't pay attention to Old Man Xiao at all and did what she should do. Old Man Xiao was so angry that he hit the floor tiles with his crutch. Ning Shu felt that this guy was simply a wooden club. The bank was about to take away the house. Shouldn't he be worried about where to live in the future? Sure enough, not long after Xiao Yan was arrested, the bank came to seal up the whole house. Everything was pasted with a note, indicating that this thing no longer belonged to the Xiao family. Even Mrs. Zhao's jewelry was taken away. Su Meng's small apartment that Xiao Yan gave her was taken away. Su Meng took the 2 children to the house arranged by Li Xiuwen. Li Xiuwen was considerate and sent a servant to take care of them. Su Meng didn't mention all kinds of thanks, but Old Man Xiao wasn't so lucky and was directly driven out. Old Man Xiao and Mrs. Zhao's faces were ugly. The old couple who had enjoyed half of their lives suddenly didn't know where to go. Ning Shu took her suitcase and was about to leave. Mrs. Xiao saw that Ning Shu was about to leave and quickly grabbed Ning Shu and asked anxiously, "Where are you going? You took the Xiao family's money and are ready to run away." Ning Shu, when did she take the Xiao family's money? If the loot that Li Xiuwen gave her was indeed the Xiao family's money. Of course, Mrs. Xiao didn't know that her daughter-in-law had colluded with others to destroy the Xiao family. However, she and old Master Xiao didn't know where to go now, so naturally, they had to rely on Ning Shu. The two of them didn't care about Ning Shu's expression. They just followed Ning Shu. Ning Shu sneered. He ignored the two of them and went to a small district. Ning Shu bought a house in this district in case of a situation like today. Mrs. Xiao walked into the room with a look of disdain on her face. Why is the room so small? All the rooms added together were not even as big as the villa's kitchen. Mr. Xiao also showed dissatisfaction on his face. Ning Shu said, "You let us live in such a house." Ning Shu said indifferently, "If you don't want to live here, you can leave." This house was not small. It was more than 100 square meters. Mrs. Xiao and old Master Xiao couldn't find a place to live at the moment, so they could only stay here. When it was time to eat, the two of them sat at the dining table and looked at Ning Shu. Ning Shu sneered directly. "If you want to eat, do it yourself. There are no servants here to serve you." He took his suitcase and left. Mrs. Xiao was so angry that her body was trembling. She cursed loudly in the house. In the end, old Master Xiao was so hungry that he asked Mrs. Xiao to prepare food. Mrs. Xiao was someone who was served by others. She didn't do any household chores. Now that she suddenly had to cook, the taste was imaginable. After old Master Xiao ate it, he had diarrhea for the whole day. Ning Shu went to see Li Xiuwen. Li Xiuwen's face showed a complacent smile. There was nothing happier than having a beauty in his arms. Li Xiuwen wanted to kill Xiao Yan in prison directly, but Ning Shu didn't agree. It was too easy for Xiao Yan to die like this. He said to Li Xiuwen, "Are you stupid? If Xiao Yan really died in prison, Su Meng would miss him for the rest of her life." Now that the two of them were loving each other passionately, if they suddenly separated, wouldn't it be the most beautiful moment in their memory? Li Xiuwen's face showed a look of understanding. He pointed at the table and said, "That's right. Now is the best time for you to win Xiao Yan's heart. Let's make a bet. Let's see if you can make Xiao Yan fall in love with you first, or Su Meng will fall in love with me first." Ning Shu, fuck off. Why are the people in this world so disgusting? Ning Shu got what she deserved. Now, the Xiao family and the Su family combined were not as rich as her, especially the Xiao family who had no money at all. Xiao Yan's sentence came out. He was sentenced to 2.5 years for hiring a hitman to cause intentional injury. However, Xiao Yan didn't plead guilty. Xiao Yan was domineering and wanted to appeal, but no one cared. The evidence was conclusive. It didn't matter if he pleaded guilty or not. When the Xiao family got the news, they forced Ning Shu to get Xiao Yan out. Ning Shu didn't care about these people at all. Madame Xiao looked at Ning Shu with resentment. During this period of time, Madame Xiao had been in a lot of pain. She had to do everything by herself. Her well-maintained hands had become rough, and she had become haggard. Ning Shu didn't eat at home at all, and Mr. Xiao and Mrs. Xiao didn't have money at all. They had to do the laundry and cook by themselves. Mrs. Xiao, who used to be graceful and elegant, was responsible for everything. Seeing Ning Shu living so comfortably, Madame Xiao was so jealous that her heart was filled with venom. She missed the time when she had servants to serve her. Madame Xiao wanted to act like a mother-in-law, but Ning Shu immediately asked the two of them to get lost. With nowhere to go and no money on them, the two of them were at a loss. Mr. Xiao used his old connections to get Xiao Yan out and borrow some money to make a comeback. He called them, but these people had to deal with Mr. Xiao before. Now, they didn't even answer the phone. Mr. Xiao was so angry that he had high blood pressure. These people who hit a man when he was down, didn't they think about how humble they were before? Now, they immediately became arrogant. Xiao Yan had been in prison for almost a week. Even Su Meng couldn't bear it anymore. Su Meng thought that Mr. Xiao would get Xiao Yan out, but Xiao Yan didn't come out after such a long time. As long as she thought of Xiao Yan's suffering, Su Meng's heart was stirred by a knife. She took the two children to Ning Shu. As soon as Su Meng saw Ning Shu, she knelt in front of Ning Shu and looked at Ning Shu with a pair of eyes that seemed to have suffered extreme pain. Ning Shu shouted, "Su Ran, I know you hate me. You hate me, it has nothing to do with Xiao Yan. Now, Xiao Yan can come out with just a word from you. Do you really have the heart to let him go to prison?" Ning Shu looked at Su Meng incredulously. Xiao Yan had committed a crime. What did she mean that Xiao Yan can come out with just a word from her? Was the law so childish? "Mom, get up, I will find a way to save Dad. You don't have to beg this vicious woman." Su Debao wanted to pull Su Meng up, but Su Meng insisted on kneeling in front of Ning Shu. Su Debao looked at Ning Shu with gloomy and vicious eyes. Chapter 87. Ning Shu looked at Su Meng, who was kneeling in front of him. Her face was full of grief and helplessness. She seemed to be in extreme pain and her eyes were full of struggle. "Su Ran, I know you hate me, but this has nothing to do with Xiao Yan. Please save Xiao Yan. If you are willing to save him, I will never appear in front of Xiao Yan again." Su Meng's face was full of sacrifice for love. She gave up everything she loved and would rather suffer and endure the pain. Ning Shu was speechless. He was speechless. He was really speechless. Su Meng burst into tears and said, "As long as you promise to let Xiao Yan go, I promise to break up with Xiao Yan." Plop. Mr. Xiao also knelt in front of Ning Shu. The muscles on his face trembled as if he had been greatly insulted. He said, "Please find Xiao Yan. In the future, you will be the mistress of the Xiao family and Xiao Yan will not divorce you." When Su Meng heard this, she sat on the ground in a daze. She looked miserable. What was so good about being the mistress of the Xiao family now? First, the Xiao family had no money. Second, Xiao Yan was now a criminal. Even the old couple of the Xiao family had nowhere to go now. What was so attractive about being the mistress of the Xiao family? Why did Mr. Xiao still feel so good about himself? Did he really think that others cared about his son? Ning Shu didn't speak and directly called Li Xiuwen. After a while, Li Xiuwen came. Seeing Su Meng kneeling on the ground, he quickly helped Su Meng up and asked, "Are you okay?" Su Meng shook her head in tears and said sadly, "I'm fine. I'm just too worried about Xiao Yan." When Su Meng said this, Ning Shu clearly saw Li Xiuwen's face twitch for a moment. Then, he recovered his gentle and considerate look. Was it really okay to mention Xiao Yan in front of Li Xiuwen? Was it really okay for Su Meng to provoke Li Xiuwen like this? Fortunately, Li Xiuwen could hold back. Ning Shu said to Li Xiuwen, "Tie up your dog. Don't let her run around. Look how crazy she is." Li Xiuwen didn't say anything. He just left with Su Meng, whose body was weak from crying, and Su Debao, whose face was gloomy. Old man Xiao, who had been kneeling on the ground, was already old. After kneeling for such a long time, his legs were numb. Seeing that Ning Shu was ignoring him, his face twitched. It was humiliating for a father-in-law to kneel in front of his daughter-in-law. It made old man Xiao, who had been domineering his whole life, feel incomparably humiliated. Therefore, even though old man Xiao was kneeling, he looked at Ning Shu with hatred and disgust. Ning Shu also felt drunk. Looking at old man Zhao's attitude, a normal person would not save Xiao Yan. Asking for help should have the attitude of asking for help. However, Ning Shu really wanted to get Xiao Yan out. 2 years in prison was really too easy for Xiao Yan. What if Xiao Yan became a tyrant in prison and recruited a lot of underlings and became the boss of the underworld when he came out? Xiao Yan was the male lead of this world. He was very lucky. Taking advantage of the fact that Xiao Yan had nothing now, he wanted to get him out and make him completely unable to turn over. Ning Shu spent a lot of money and found a lot of connections to get Xiao Yan out. Ning Shu looked at Xiao Yan, who was wearing a prison uniform. His head was shaved bald. His appearance had decreased a lot. Xiao Yan's eyes were still unruly, with a sense of superiority. Anyway, Ning Shu didn't know where his sense of superiority came from. When Xiao Yan saw Ning Shu, his first sentence was, "Su Ran, you vicious woman. Even if you save me, I won't love you." Ning Shu, Xiao Yan looked at Ning Shu coldly and sat in the car. Ning Shu didn't bother to talk to him and drove back to the community. When Xiao Yan walked into the house, his first reaction was the same as old couple Xiao. Old couple Xiao was excited to see Xiao Yan. Mrs. Xiao told Xiao Yan about Ning Shu's abominable behavior, which made Xiao Yan look at Ning Shu even more coldly. Especially when he heard that Ning Shu asked his father to kneel, his eyes were full of murderous intent when he looked at Ning Shu. Facing Xiao Yan's expression, Ning Shu sneered coldly. Did he really think that all the women in the world loved him and should tolerate him? Xiao Yan was full of depression. He felt like a dragon trapped in shallow water. He locked himself at home and refused to eat. No matter how old man Xiao and Mrs. Xiao tried to persuade him, it was useless. Ning Shu looked at the food in front of the door. Since Xiao Yan didn't want to eat, he didn't want to eat. Ning Shu directly threw the food into the trash can. Seeing Ning Shu's action, Mrs. Xiao was so angry that she gasped, but she didn't dare to say anything. Now the Xiao family had to ask Ning Shu for money for everything. If they annoyed Ning Shu would refuse to pay and they would starve again. Once, they starved for a whole day. In the end, Mrs. Xiao came to Ning Shu to ask for money to eat. Only then did Mrs. Xiao and old man Xiao eat. Every time Mrs. Xiao and old man Xiao looked at Ning Shu with hatred and humiliation, but they didn't dare to say anything. Seeing Ning Shu throw away their son's food, Mrs. Xiao couldn't help but say, "Su Ran, how can you be so vicious? Xiao Yan didn't even eat when he came out and you threw away his food." Ning Shu snorted. "Since you don't want to eat, don't eat anymore. You." Mrs. Xiao looked at Ning Shu. "You will get your retribution." Ning Shu said coldly, "I don't know if I will get my retribution, but you will soon get yours." Hearing this, Mrs. Xiao trembled. Thinking that she had to take money from Ning Shu, she could only swallow her anger. In the end, Xiao Yan came out to eat because he was hungry. Ning Shu personally handed the food to Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan looked at Ning Shu condescendingly and sneered. "Su Ran, no matter how you please me, I won't change my mind about you." Xiao Yan took the bowl from Ning Shu's hand and ate. Because he ate too quickly, he choked. With a big bald head, he looked really wretched. Ning Shu watched from the side and smiled coldly. "I hope you'll be fine after eating this meal." Knowing that Xiao Yan had come out, Su Meng brought the two children over. When she saw Xiao Yan, Su Meng's lips trembled, and then she threw herself into Xiao Yan's arms. She reached out to touch Xiao Yan's bald head and said with a trembling voice, "You've suffered." Ning Shu almost laughed his pants off. This scene was funny no matter how he looked at it. Li Xiuwen stood not far away and looked at the two people hugging each other. His expression was very complicated. Ning Shu could not describe it. The two children hugged Xiao Yan and cried. Xiao Yan comforted one and the other. Xiao Yan said to Su Meng affectionately, "I will pull myself together and give you and the children something to rely on." Su Meng covered her mouth and shook her head. Xiao Yan was very anxious. "I won't let you and the children suffer." Su Meng was still crying. She looked at Ning Shu with a painful expression. Xiao Yan noticed Su Meng's gaze and turned to Ning Shu. "You evil woman, what did you do to Su Meng?" Chapter 88. Vicious woman, vicious woman. Now Xiao Yan didn't even call her name. Every time he opened his mouth, he would call her a vicious woman. Xiao Yan hugged Su Meng and glared at Ning Shu. If you dare to hurt Su Meng, I won't let you go. Su Meng shook her head at Xiao Yan. It's none of her business. I decided to leave you. As long as you come out, it's fine. Xiao Yan, forget me. You are my woman. I won't allow you to run away from me. Xiao Yan hugged Su Meng tightly and roared, with a vicious look in his eyes. Su Ran, give up. You actually used me to threaten Su Meng. You are vicious. Ning Shu didn't know what she had said to Su Meng. It was always Su Meng talking to herself. She was the one who said that she would leave after saving Xiao Yan. Ning Shu sneered and tore apart the two people who would never be separated from each other. He directly pushed Su Meng into Li Xiuwen's arms, then turned around and slapped Xiao Yan in the face. Then another slap in the face, and then another. Ning Shu patted his hands. Xiao Yan, look at the situation clearly. If you keep calling me a vicious woman, I will let you die miserably, very miserably. Xiao Yan was slapped in the face one after another. From the bankruptcy of the Xiao family, to the imprisonment, and now, even his beloved woman was threatened to leave him. Xiao Yan's heart was burning with anger. Xiao Yan roared and stretched out his hand to hit Ning Shu. Ning Shu grabbed Xiao Yan's hand and then gave Xiao Yan a handsome shoulder throw. Xiao Yan fell to the ground with a bang. Xiao Yan felt that his waist was about to break. Before he could react, he felt the stiff soles of shoes stepping on his face. Ning Shu smiled evilly. He stepped on Xiao Yan's face and rubbed it hard. The people around looked at Ning Shu's actions with a dull face. The first to react was Su Debao. He came over and kicked Ning Shu, shouting, "Let go of my father, you vicious woman." Ning Shu pushed Su Debao away. Su Debao fell to the ground and cried loudly. Su Meng hugged Su Debao. Su Ran, what did the child do wrong? Why are you treating the child like this? Kids should act like kids. Get out of my house. Ning Shu pointed at the door. Get out of my house. Don't disgust me in front of me. Li Xiuwen took Su Meng away. When they left, Su Meng's face was full of pain. She kept looking at Xiao Yan, whose face was bruised and swollen. In the end, she was pulled away by Li Xiuwen impatiently. Su Debao turned around and looked at Ning Shu, his eyes full of resentment. When Xiao Yan's parents saw their son being beaten like this, they were so angry that they couldn't speak. They didn't dare to say anything, because Ning Shu now controlled their lives. Even if they wanted to buy a green onion, they had to ask Ning Shu for money. Xiao Yan locked himself in the room again. Then he came out to eat because he was hungry. After eating, he locked himself in the house again. No one knew what he was doing. Old man Xiao was still counting on his son to rise. He found Ning Shu and said that he wanted to borrow money from Ning Shu to let Xiao Yan do business. Old man Xiao kept saying that the husband and wife should be honored and the couple should work together. Ning Shu directly rolled his eyes and ignored old man Xiao. Old man Xiao was so angry that his heart hurt and his blood pressure soared. He was so humble, but the other party still didn't agree. Not to mention the situation of Xiao family, Su Meng was very sad. She was in pain as if the sky was falling down. Li Xiuwen first comforted her. In the end, Li Xiuwen couldn't stand it anymore and finally slept with Su Meng. Su Meng felt that the world was about to collapse. This gentleman actually treated her like this when she was the saddest. Su Meng looked like she had nothing to live for. Li Xiuwen liked Su Meng in his heart. He was gentle and considerate to Su Meng, but Su Meng still refused to forgive Li Xiuwen. Li Xiuwen was a little annoyed by Su Meng. Sometimes, he didn't care about Su Meng's feelings and directly pushed Su Meng. After that, Su Meng felt sorry for Xiao Yan and resented Li Xiuwen in her heart. Then Li Xiuwen and Su Meng started a sadistic love story. They slept and cried, cried and slept, slept and woke up again. There was also Su Debao, who had a high IQ. He directly used his hacking skills to invade the bank system and gave a sum of money to Xiao Yan. He wanted Xiao Yan to make a comeback and was determined to let his mother and father be together. Ning Shu saw that Xiao Yan, who had been dispirited, suddenly became radiant. He intuitively felt that there was a problem. Then, he beat Xiao Yan very violently and took a bank card from him. After knowing that the money was actually given to Xiao Yan by Su Debao, Ning Shu sighed. He was moved by Su Debao's filial piety and then called the police. People like Su Debao, who didn't have a sense of right and wrong, didn't have a country in his heart, and had a high IQ, could definitely become a terrorist. It would be better if the country could control and use him. Otherwise, people like Su Debao would be very dangerous. Probably because Su Debao got too much money, the police immediately began to act. No matter how bad Su Debao was, he was only a 6-year-old child. He was caught by a fully armed police. Ning Shu knew that Su Debao used a loophole in the bank system to give Xiao Yan hundreds of millions. Hundreds of millions. Su Debao, who was caught, was directly sent to the juvenile detention center. When Su Meng heard the news, she almost fainted from crying. First, she ran to beg Xiao Yan, but when she saw Xiao Yan, she was so shocked that she forgot to cry. Finally, when she heard the person in front of her affectionately calling her name, Su Meng's face collapsed. Because the current Xiao Yan was fat, very fat, and his whole body was swollen, like an inflated balloon. His face was no longer as handsome as before. With every step he took, the floor trembled. Looking at Xiao Yan, who was like a moving mountain of meat, walking in front of her, Su Meng's face was pale and in disbelief. With a pig-like face and affectionate eyes, if it was the previous handsome face, Su Meng was afraid that her face would blush and her heart would beat faster. But now, there was a nauseating feeling, which made Su Meng's face even paler, and her body was on the verge of collapse. Su Meng didn't even say a word and turned away, not mentioning the matter of asking Xiao Yan to save her son. Seeing Su Meng avoiding him, the fat on Xiao Yan's face twitched twice, and his greasy face looked a little ferocious. Xiao Yan turned his head and shouted at Ning Shu, who had been leaning against the door and watching the bustling scene, "You vicious woman, what did you do to me? Hee hee." Ning Shu spread her hands and looked at the fat Xiao Yan. This was indeed done by her. In Xiao Yan's 3 meals a day, Ning Shu put a lot of hormones in it, and then Xiao Yan quickly swelled up. What would true love between him and Su Meng be like if he didn't have a wealthy family or a handsome and seductive appearance? Su Meng's performance just now, hee hee. Chapter 89. Xiao Yan was now eating more and more. He was a rice bucket. The more he ate, the fatter he became. The fatter he was, the more he ate. It was a vicious cycle. Seeing his son become like this, Mr. Xiao sighed every day in hope that his son would rise up. But now his grandson was in the juvenile detention center. Mr. Xiao was in great pain. There was nothing more painful than seeing hope slowly dashed. Mr. Xiao's hair turned white after a period of time. Mrs. Xiao had to do laundry, cook, and mop the floor all day long. She was supposed to be a sugar baby. The collagen on her face was quickly lost, and her whole face was sagging. She was no longer as plump and young as before. Now Mrs. Xiao had no time or money to do a facial. The old couple was now struggling at death's door under Ning Shu. They were satisfied as long as they had something to eat. Every time she asked for money from Ning Shu, Mrs. Xiao would show a flattering smile. She was no longer the elegant Mrs. Xiao of the past. His entire being seemed to have aged. Even though Xiao Yan had changed beyond recognition, Xiao Yan still had a proud heart. He still treated Ning Shu coldly. Sometimes, his fat eyes would reveal a vicious look. At first glance, it was obvious that he was up to something. Ning Shu sneered and said in front of the Shao family, "I've already written my will. If I die, I'll donate all my assets and this house. When the time comes, you guys can eat dirt, bitch, you vicious woman, I am your husband, your money is also my money, why did you donate it, bitch, I must have had 8 lifetimes of bad luck to marry a jinx like you." The fat on Xiao Yan's face trembled, incomparably ferocious. Ning Shu sneered and said indifferently, "I'm not a jinx. If you want to talk about jinxes, it should be Su Meng. The Xiao family's downfall happened after you and Su Meng got together. Don't forget that I've been married to you for nearly 6 years and this happened. It would be best if he could have a love-hate relationship with Su Meng." Now, Ning Shu was not even interested in Xiao Yan's body and trampling on Xiao Yan's dignity. Instead, he was taking advantage of himself. Xiao Yan struggled, his fat jiggling. Finally, Ning Shu roared, "You bitch, I won't believe your words. Alright, if you want to deceive yourself, then go ahead." Ning Shu didn't intend to let Xiao Yan see her good side. Although Xiao Yan didn't believe Ning Shu's words, Su Meng had run away when she saw him, which left a shadow in Xiao Yan's heart. On the other hand, Su Meng wanted to save her son, so she could only beg Li Xiuwen. Su Meng put on an expression that said, "As long as you save my son, you can do whatever you want." She had sacrificed a lot for the greater good. In her heart, she still felt the pain of betraying Xiao Yan, but she had her own difficulties. In the end, Li Xiuwen still went to save Su Debao, but he couldn't even see Su Debao's face. The people in the juvenile detention center directly quarantined Su Debao. They were very strict. Such a young child with such ability, they were determined not to let him into society. Moreover, the people in the juvenile detention center also found that this child's mentality was somewhat twisted. He didn't have a sense of right and wrong at all. He was too dangerous. Even if Li Xiuwen had the means to save Su Debao, who was defined as a dangerous person by the country. It would be fine if he could be brainwashed, but if he couldn't be trained, he could only end Su Debao's life at the age of 18. Even Li Xiuwen couldn't save Su Debao. Su Meng was completely desperate. She looked like her world was collapsing all day long. She cried and stuttered. Facing a pair of swollen eyelids all day long, Li Xiuwen was also a little impatient. The number of times he came to find Su Meng became even less. Su Meng was even more desperate. She felt like she was abandoned by the whole world. She was even sadder. She hugged Su Xiaobao and cried every day. Su Xiaobao's face was wooden and gloomy. He persuaded his mother not to cry. However, after a long time, Su Xiaobao stopped persuading her and just listened to Su Meng cry all day long. Even in such a situation, Su Meng didn't go to find Xiao Yan. It was probably because Xiao Yan's face was too impactful. Then, Li Xiuwen got married. The person he married was a rich family's daughter, and not Su Meng. When Su Meng found out about this news, she felt that her world was gloomy. Li Xiuwen, that gentle man, also betrayed her. Su Meng felt that God wanted to send all the suffering to her. She was really, really in pain. At the wedding of Li Xiuwen and the rich family's daughter, Su Meng asked Li Xiuwen with a face full of pain and despair. Why did he betray her? Li Xiuwen's face was black at that time. He directly asked people to throw Su Meng out. Ning Shu knew that the supporting male lead didn't get together with the female lead. He pursed his lips. Now that he had successfully become the male lead, he actually didn't want to be the female lead anymore. He was so unambitious. Serves him right to be the supporting male lead. However, it seemed that Xiao Yan and Su Meng, the supporting male lead, had been separated. Li Xiuwen's halo was also gone. Li Xiuwen's new wife was also not a kind person. She directly took back the house that Li Xiuwen gave Su Meng and chased Su Meng out. Su Meng, who had nowhere to go, could only find a dirty and small rented house to live. Su Xiaobao, who was already 6 years old, was already at the age of going to school. However, Su Meng didn't seem to have thought of this. She was sad and didn't think of earning money until she ran out of money. Su Meng could only look at Su Xiaobao with a pair of innocent almond eyes. In the end, she said to Su Xiaobao with a strong face, "Mommy will definitely work hard to support you. I promise." It wasn't that Su Meng didn't think of looking for Xiao Yan. There was once when she secretly went to look for Xiao Yan. She found that Xiao Yan was now as fat as a pig. Not only that, he was also missing a leg. Because he was too fat, he couldn't sit in a wheelchair and could only sleep on the bed. There was a strange vomit-inducing smell in the house. Of course, the smell was a little unbearable. As for how Xiao Yan lost his leg, it was because Xiao Yan knew that his son was going to be locked up for the rest of his life. He was too anxious, and when he went downstairs, he fell and fractured his leg. It was fine after a plaster cast. When Ning Shu heard the doctor's words, Ning Shu exclaimed in surprise. He signed the surgery book and directly said, "Cut it off." After knowing that his leg was gone, Xiao Yan looked as if he had gone crazy. He looked at Ning Shu with red eyes. "Su Ran, even if I become a ghost, I won't let you go in this life or the next life." Ning Shu smiled indifferently, looking incomparably cold. However, it made Xiao Yan feel cold to the bone. This woman, Su Meng left and never came to look for Xiao Yan again. When Ning Shu found out, he just smiled indifferently and didn't say anything. True love was just like that. They didn't have to worry about daily necessities. They had endless money to spend on romance. They didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to worry about, "I love you, you love him, and he loves her," all day long. It was an unparalleled and beautiful love that was untainted by the world. Chapter 90. Su Xiaobao sat in front of the door of the dilapidated and dirty rented apartment. His face was a little dirty, and he no longer looked as innocent and cute as before. He heard moaning and panting sounds coming from the door. Not long after, a fat man came out. When he saw Su Xiaobao, his eyes were filled with lust. Su Xiaobao walked into the room. There was a strange smell in the room. Su Meng was lying on the bed with a blush on her face. Seeing Su Xiaobao come in, Su Meng passed the money to him, saying that it was for today's meal. Su Xiaobao took the money with a blank face. Ning Shu knew that Su Meng had walked down the path of Su Ran in the original plot, selling her body to live. He was a little stunned, but it was normal. Su Meng and Su Ran were both daughters of rich families, and they didn't have any life skills. Su Meng was lucky to be the female lead, and she would have a powerful man to protect her, so she wouldn't have to live a miserable life. Su Meng's character was innocent and delicate, and she didn't eat the food of mortals. Now, in order to survive, she had to make sacrifices. Ning Shu didn't even make a move, and she was already like this. She was quite good at acting. Mrs. Su brought Su Lan to Ning Shu to apologize. Ning Shu looked at Su Lan, who was looking up and couldn't be bothered with him. Su Lan didn't look like a noble and elegant prince anymore, and he was full of gloominess. The changes in the family had brought some changes to him. Ning Shu laughed and secretly gave Mrs. Su a lot of money. The Su family couldn't even be considered a well-off family now. Mrs. Su looked at Ning Shu in shock. Ning Shu directly told Mrs. Su to not let Su Bo and Su Lan know about this money. In the original plot, Su Bo ran away with Su Lan, leaving Mrs. Su and Su Ran alone. This money was for Mrs. Su, and Ning Shu believed that Su Bo still had money in his hands. Ning Shu had a feeling that this world's mission was about to be completed. "Hurry up and leave, ding, mission completed, do you want to leave the mission world?" After an ear-piercing sound, Ning Shu heard the cold mechanical voice of the system. Ning Shu never felt that the system's voice was so beautiful and warm. "Leave, hurry up," Ning Shu said anxiously. Then, Ning Shu felt like the world was spinning, and he almost vomited. When he opened his eyes, he was already in the system space. Ning Shu let out a long breath, and then let out a long sigh, as if he wanted to let out all the depression in his heart. He had never felt so tired. "Do you want to check your points?" "Yes." A screen appeared in front of Ning Shu, and on it was her information. Number, 23333 Name, Ning Age, 27 Age, 27 EXP, 8600, 8600/10,000, Soul Value, 60 Health Value, 50 Intelligence, 80 Charm, 1 Luck, 25, 3, Spirit, 121 20 Combat Power, 10 Potential, 24, 2, Merit, 2 Skills, 5 Ring Spear Technique, Trash Fighting Technique, Trash Peerless Martial Arts Beginners Trash Honorary Title, Goddess of War. When Ning Shu saw that she only had 1,500 points this time, she felt terrible. She had thought that she would be able to get rid of the title of Cannon Fodder Trainee, and become an official player, losing the title of 2,333. However, the amount of points in this world was pitifully low. After calming down, Ning Shu thought for a while and understood why his points were so low. It was because the original Su Ran's request was to protect the Su family, but when the Su family was in trouble, she chose to stand aside and watch. So, from a certain point of view, there was a mission that was not completed. Forget it, the points were low. "There are 5 points to distribute, please distribute them yourself," the system said. Ning Shu thought for a while, and decided to add the points to his luck. Character was very important, and then add it to his soul. The stronger the soul, the better. Ning Shu finished adding the points, and the screen changed. Number, 23333 Name, Ning Shu Age, 27 Experience, 8600, 8600/10,000, Soul Value, 601 Health Value, 501 Intelligence, 80 Charm, 1 Luck, 283 Spirit, 120 Strength, 10 Talent, 26 Merit, 2 Skills, 5 Ring Spear Technique, Trash Fighting Technique, Trash Peerless Martial Arts Beginners Trash Honorary Title, Goddess of War. Host, why don't you add a point to your charm? Your charm is too low, and you only have 1 point. The system said. Ning Shu saw that his charm was only a lonely 1. Ning Shu felt that he was being ridiculed by the system. Why did it only say something after she finished distributing the points? What are the benefits of charm? Ning Shu asked. Charm can make others have a good impression of the player. The system said concisely. Okay, it sounded like cheating, why didn't it say so earlier? Forget it, if I don't have charm, I'll just use violence to solve the problem. Ning Shu sat in the space and began to circulate his peerless martial arts. He began to absorb the matter in the space that could strengthen his soul. This time, Ning Shu felt that his soul was being consumed more than in the previous 2 worlds. Ah, that retard must have used a soul attack on me, causing my soul to become so dim. It's more tiring than fighting and killing. Ning Shu closed his eyes, relaxed his mind, and settled his thoughts. After an unknown amount of time, Ning Shu opened his eyes and saw that his soul had become a little stronger. There was an indescribable joy in his heart, and he shouted, "System, I want to enter the mission world." Wait, I want to ask what the next world is. Ning Shu didn't even finish his words when the world started to spin, and his whole body became unwell. By the time Ning Shu had almost completely fused with this body, before she opened her eyes, she felt someone kick her leg. It was neither light nor heavy, but it hurt quite a bit. Ning Shu opened his eyes, and felt that the light was a little dazzling, so he used his hand to block it. Hurry up and get up, how long are you going to sleep for? A man said. Ning Shu put down the hand in front of his eyes, and only then did he see the man in front of him. He looked very ordinary, about 30 or 40 years old, and he was wearing a t-shirt with some dirty things on it. He was so ordinary that if he was thrown into a crowd, he wouldn't attract attention. However, Ning Shu's body tensed up, and he felt that the person in front of him was very dangerous. "Hurry up and eat, what are you dawdling for? You're the only one dawdling all the way here," the man said to Ning Shu in a bad mood. He walked in front and muttered, "I don't know why the officer called her here." Ning Shu followed behind the man. Now that he had just arrived in this world, and he hadn't accepted the plot, he was really confused. He looked around, and it seemed to be an abandoned factory. Ning Shu touched his waist, and he actually felt a gun. Suddenly, his heart was filled with a sense of security, at least he had something to protect his life. Ning Shu's nose twitched. She didn't know if it was her imagination, but she felt that the air was filled with a strange smell. When she breathed it into her lungs, it felt as if there was sand scraping against her lungs. There was a burning sensation, and when she looked at the sky from afar, she felt that the sky was always gray. Damn, he had a bad feeling. Chapter 91. Ning Shu followed the man in front of her into the room. There were 4 other people in the room. Seeing Ning Shu enter the room, they just glanced at her and continued eating. Ning Shu vaguely sensed that these people were very disdainful of her. "Eat something, you're still a child." The man who asked Ning Shu to eat before pushed a box of biscuits and a bottle of water in front of Ning Shu. Ning Shu thanked him and looked around the room. She found that there was another woman in the room. Her expression was very cold. She wore tight clothes that were convenient for movement, outlining her curvaceous figure. She was a cold and elegant woman. She secretly observed the other people and found another man. He was very handsome and had an unrestrained temperament. However, his eyes were cold. When he turned his head and met Ning Shu's eyes, Ning Shu felt cold all over. This person had a murderous aura towards her. Although this murderous aura was very subtle, Ning Shu still felt it. After looking around, except for a man and a woman who were very good-looking, the others were very ordinary. They were so ordinary that one would forget what they looked like after a glance. Ning Shu suddenly wanted to find a mirror to see what this body looked like. Could it be the same as the others, the same existence that set off these 2 people? What's the situation now? The feeling of not knowing anything is really bad. Ning Shu took a bite of the biscuit and almost broke her teeth. What kind of biscuit is so hard? Seeing that the others had finished eating the biscuits, Ning Shu didn't care whether the biscuits were hard or not. She mixed the biscuits with water and ate them all. Now Ning Shu just wanted to find a place to receive the plot. She was dumbfounded. Finished eating, finished eating. Let's plan which direction to go next. The handsome man said. His voice was unexpectedly fancy. How was it fancy? It was just that when he spoke, he had the feeling of a playboy, giving people a romantic feeling. Even so, Ning Shu felt that he was very dangerous. Ning Shu didn't say anything because she didn't know what to say. One of the men looked annoyed and dissatisfied. This lunatic can really run. Where did he go? Lunatic? What lunatic? Ning Shu was dumbfounded and didn't say anything. I think we should keep going forward. If we keep going forward, we'll reach the border. That's where the zombies haven't spread. Madman should have gone there, and he knows that the country is looking for him. The woman's attitude was very cold. Wait, zombies, zombies. Ning Shu only wanted to quickly receive the plot. While everyone was discussing, Ning Shu didn't say a word. However, the other 5 people didn't care at all. They ignored Ning Shu's existence. After the discussion, they all got into the off-road vehicle. Ning Shu also got into the car and asked the man sitting opposite him, "What lunatic? Hua, are you really stupid? Usually your brain isn't clear. Now you even forgot the mission after sleeping." The man sitting opposite him said in a very bad tone. Ning Shu immediately closed her mouth. This body's name is Hua Duo. Forget it, I'll find a chance to receive the plot. Ning Shu looked out of the car for a while. It was clearly a highway, but there were almost no cars on the road. Along the way, there were no cars at all. After looking for a while, Ning Shu withdrew her gaze and meditated in the car. She wanted to see if she could cultivate peerless martial arts in this world. In any case, she had to have strength to complete the mission. After an unknown amount of time, Ning Shu's body finally had a trace of qi. This qi circulated in Ning Shu's body and constantly strengthened her body. Ning Shu was even a little surprised that this world could cultivate qi so early. One must know that when she was a little princess, she couldn't even cultivate qi for a month. When Ning Shu woke up, her stomach was growling, but there was nothing to eat. This feeling was too familiar. The body needed a lot of energy, so she was hungry. The problem was that there was nothing to eat. Ning Shu shamelessly asked the cold woman sitting next to her for 2 packets of biscuits. Under the disdainful eyes of everyone, she ate all the biscuits. At this time, a burst of inhuman roars came from afar. Then the air was filled with a rotten smell. Zombies, be careful. The driver's face was cold. The car didn't stop, but instead sped up. It directly hit the zombies in front and then ran over them. The car jolted a little. Ning Shu looked at the zombies outside the window and unconsciously roared. Their bodies were gray, and some parts were rotten. There were even maggots crawling on the rotten flesh. Their eyes looked like lime balls, gray and scary. Their movements were very slow, but the force they used to hit the window was very strong. With one hit, the window cracked. What kind of monsters are these? They obviously have no signs of life, but I don't know what kind of power is controlling these rotten corpses. It's so strange. The car drove very fast, and soon they got rid of them. Ning Shu let out a sigh of relief. The atmosphere in the car was not as tense as before. Lone Wolf, find a place to rest. The woman said to the handsome man driving in front. The man smiled evilly at the woman. Roger. The man called Lone Wolf found an abandoned house. The house was very simple, but no one said anything. Ning Shu only had one feeling, and that was that he was very hungry. After casually eating something, Lone Wolf arranged for someone to keep watch at night. He probably saw that Ning Shu was just a little girl, so he didn't arrange for her to keep watch at night. There was one other person who received such treatment, and that was the beautiful woman. Ning Shu finally found the opportunity to accept the plot. Things started with a group of inhuman monsters rushing out of the laboratory. These monsters were very strong, and they couldn't feel pain. They didn't have any signs of life, but they had a very strong desire for human flesh. Moreover, they were very infectious. If they were caught and not dismembered, they would be assimilated into zombies. The virus carried by the zombies spread quickly, and the human world was on the verge of collapse. But now Ning Shu was even more devastated. Because the person who created these monsters was the genetic scientist, the school doctor uncle, who was codenamed Crazy. Uncle, you are so awesome. Is your family man-made? You turned a beautiful school world into a doomsday world. Uncle, why don't you go to heaven? This body was called Flower, and she was a member of the special agent team. She was only 17 years old, and this was her first mission in her life. Her mission was to find this crazy man and seize the gene fluid in his hands. It would be better if she could catch him. This gene fluid was the thing that created these monsters, but this gene fluid had a 50% chance of triggering the hidden superpower in the human body. But the school doctor uncle had long run away with the gene fluid. This group of people's mission was to find the crazy man who had run away. Ning Shu. Chapter 92. In addition to Flower, there were 5 other agents who had formed a team to look for Madman. The other 5 agents were all experienced agents of the country. It was the first time this body went on a mission and became a hindrance to the team. Therefore, the attitude of the team members towards Flower was very bad. In fact, Flower did not know that the agents in the team had already turned to codename Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix. They had already betrayed the country. After finding the gene fluid, they directly injected it. Moreover, the 5 of them awakened their abilities and built a base. At this time, more and more people were infected. The country also fell apart, and the bases rose one after another to resist the zombies. Flower was also killed the moment the team obtained the gene fluid. She was thrown into the zombie crowd and dismembered. She did not even have the chance to become a zombie. Well, this little girl could not even be considered a supporting female lead. She could only be considered a small cannon fodder, an insignificant cannon fodder. Then Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix should be the male and female leads. The other agents were ordinary, but Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix were capricious. The male lead was handsome and tall, while the female lead was cold and elegant. The original owner's wish was, 1. To survive in this apocalyptic world. 2. To give the gene fluid to the country and not let Young Phoenix and Lone Wolf take it. Ning Shu looked at the 2 people's mission. He felt that it was easier than the previous missions. Easy my ass. Snatching something from the male and female leads was not an ordinary difficulty. Ning Shu could also understand why the original owner wanted to give the gene fluid to the country. In fact, the original owner did not have the concept of a country. She only wanted to do it for the leader of the agent team. This leader raised her and trained her. She wanted to work hard to complete the mission to repay the leader's kindness. Well, he felt that this girl was quite naive and cute. She did not even know what was happening in the team. Why was it that every mission was so lousy? Moreover, the plot did not mention what happened to the mad scientist who caused the world to become like this. The team found the gene fluid in a simple laboratory. Fuck, it felt like the school doctor uncle was a transcendent existence. The scourge lived for 1,000 years. The uncle was going to go down in history forever and be infamous for 10,000 years. He directly changed the entire human world. A new favorite had appeared in the world. Then, the previous female lead, Ling Shui, was probably dead. Heaven and Earth's fate would choose a new favorite and redistribute fate. It was a sad story. Ning Shu wanted to cry. Mama, this world is so dangerous. Not only are there zombies, but there are also teammates who want to kill her. Hey, wake up. You've been sleeping all day. Ning Shu was kicked by someone. When he opened his eyes, the sky was already bright. Ning Shu looked at the man. This man's code name was Tarantula, and he was an expert in all kinds of firearms. At this moment, Tarantula looked at Ning Shu with an impatient expression. You are an agent. Don't you even have the most basic vigilance? You can sleep until dawn. People like you should be eaten by zombies. Ning Shu did not speak. His expression was as ignorant as usual as he followed Tarantula into the team. Today, they were eating hardtack again. Ning Shu did not care if he was used to it and finished everything because he was really hungry. Looking around, Ning Shu found that Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix were not in the team at all. He could not help but ask Tarantula, where did the captain go? The team leader was Lone Wolf, and Young Phoenix was not in the team. Ning Shu guessed very shamelessly that the 2 of them might have gone somewhere to have sex. Just take care of yourself. Why do you care about others? Tarantula said in a bad mood. The others also looked at Ning Shu as if they didn't care about her. Ning Shu was thinking in his heart. Should he directly leave the team and look for the gene fluid by himself? However, this plan was a bit risky. He had no supplies, no water, and no food. How could he walk there? If he really did that, it would be too late. Moreover, if he left the team so rashly, Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix would notice and end his life prematurely. Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix were decisive and ruthless people. Therefore, he still had to follow the team to find the gene fluid. In fact, Ning Shu still liked to face such male and female leads. He would rather face such people, at least with a normal brain, than face such people in the previous world. They were clearly the ones making trouble, but they insisted that others were being unreasonable. After breakfast, Ning Shu wanted to talk to these people, but no one paid attention to him. They wiped their pistols and sharpened their knives. In short, he was ignored. Ning Shu was speechless. Ning Shu gave up talking to these people. Ning Shu felt that the original owner was quite miserable. His strength was so bad that others did not even want to recruit him. It was also because the original owner had a one-track mind. He did not have any thoughts about the tempting gene fluid. All he wanted was to complete the mission. At this time, the door suddenly opened with a bang. Everyone looked up and saw Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix almost crawling in. Both of them had a look of horror on their faces. Be alert. Lone Wolf's face was dignified as he stood in front of Young Phoenix. Captain, what happened? Tarantula asked Lone Wolf, holding a gun in his hand and looking around vigilantly. Ning Shu pulled out his gun when the two people came in. He felt a strong pressure coming closer and closer. These two people must have provoked something. The protagonist had a constitution of accidents. When he provoked something he could not resist, he would be miserable. Those who died were all cannon fodder, but the protagonist was fine. Ning Shu's forehead was covered in cold sweat. A strong pressure almost crushed his heart. Everyone in the room had a very serious expression. Even Young Phoenix, who had always been noble and cold, had a pale face. Ning Shu took a step back and silently hid behind the team. Lone Wolf in front looked at Ning Shu with disdain. Ning Shu did not care. He was the one who provoked them, so why did he have to look down on others? Just when everyone's nerves were high, a figure suddenly appeared at the door. It was so fast that no one could react. Ning Shu took the lead and fired a shot at the afterimage. Ning Shu was stunned for a moment, and a human figure appeared in front of her. In front of her was a magnified face with a pale face. At first glance, she knew that it was a zombie, but this zombie was not as rotten as the other zombies, and its movements were more flexible than the other zombies. This was an evolved variant zombie. Ning Shu turned around and ran away without thinking. She couldn't fight against this thing. The zombie was entangled by other people, so Ning Shu managed to escape the disaster. For a time, darts, hidden weapons, and bullets were thrown at the zombie, but what made everyone collapse was that the zombie dodged them one by one. Ning Shu's jaw dropped to the ground. The apocalypse had just begun, and suddenly such a powerful thing appeared. This kind of thing was simply a killing machine. At least for now, humans had no power to resist. Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix were really good at it. Chapter 93. Roar, roar. The roar of the zombies came from afar, and it sounded like there were a lot of them. There was still a big guy in front of them that had not been dealt with, and now they were surrounded by zombies. Ning Shu looked at the zombies that were using all kinds of skills, but even bullets could not do anything to this zombie, it was really too fast. Ning Shu felt that the zombie's eyes were focused on her, it was a kind of naked desire for food. Fuck, this zombie wants to eat me. There were more and more zombies around, and the rotten smell made people want to vomit. Ning Shu shot the zombie that wanted to catch her, and looked at the zombie that was entangled by Lone Wolf. Ning Shu felt that this zombie was fighting with this team. Did Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix provoke this zombie? Suddenly, Ning Shu's hair stood up, and a cold breath came from behind. Ning Shu did not think and dodged, rolling on the ground to avoid the zombie's attack. Ning Shu and Young Phoenix shouted, "Did you take something?" Young Phoenix quickly shook her head, "No, I didn't." Ning Shu felt that something was wrong. Since she did not take anything, why did she fight to the death? "Everyone get in the car, get in the car." Lone Wolf shouted to the others, and took the lead to get in the car, and shouted to Young Phoenix, "Get in the car, we can't deal with this zombie." Ning Shu quickly got in the car and slammed the door. Everyone was still in shock. Ning Shu gasped, looked around, and found that there was one less person in the car, one dead. There was a change in the plot, in the original plot, except for Ning Shu, the cannon fodder, who died, the others were fine, and finally awakened the ability. Young Phoenix tightly bit her lips, her face was pale, and she looked very nervous, excited, and worried. Ning Shu intuitively felt that Young Phoenix was hiding something from them. Bang! Suddenly there was a loud noise on the roof. The mutated zombie was actually on the roof. Ning Shu had a very bad feeling. Hearing the loud sounds coming from the roof of the car, Ning Shu gripped the gun in his hand tightly. Ning Shu slammed on the brakes and accelerator, trying to get rid of the zombie on top of the car. The car was very bumpy, and Ning Shu almost vomited, but the zombie on top of the car was like a gecko, he couldn't get rid of it. Ning Shu turned around and saw a human head outside the car window. It was a gray-white zombie face. Ning Shu turned his head stiffly. What was going to happen now? The zombies were going against them. The sound on the roof of the car was still going on. There were cracks on the roof, and the sound was very loud. The windows were also shattered. Ning Shu fired a shot at the zombie's outstretched hand. The bullet grazed the gray palm and did not cause any damage to the zombie. Invulnerability. This was too abnormal. How was he supposed to fight? What are you doing? You will only anger him, Young Phoenix, Ning Shu shouted. Now that the situation was like this, who cared about anger? Fuck, the car is out of gas, Lone Wolf, who was driving, shouted. Sure enough, the car stopped after a while. The zombie that had been on the roof of the car jumped down and aimed at Young Phoenix's chest. Ning Shu was speechless. Was the zombie a pervert? Young Phoenix, who was attacked, turned pale. Facing the zombie's attack, she seemed to have lost the ability to resist. Her expression was blank. Young Phoenix, quickly dodge, Lone Wolf shouted at Young Phoenix and fired at the zombie. Surprisingly, the zombie didn't attack Young Phoenix. Instead, it pulled something out of her neck. Ning Shu held her gun and squinted at the thing in the zombie's hand. It was a glass bottle, and it shone brightly under the sunlight. The transparent liquid in the glass bottle was thicker than ordinary water. What was this? The zombies stole the gene fluid. Young Phoenix shouted. Everyone else was stunned. Gene fluid? Young Phoenix found the gene fluid? Ning Shu's expression was a bit strange. What did the zombie want the gene fluid for? There was no such thing in the plot. There's no time to explain. Anyway, we have to get the gene fluid back first, Young Phoenix shouted. Seeing that the gene fluid was in its hands, the zombie did not bother with Ning Shu's group. It grabbed the gene fluid and planned to leave. Quickly stop it. We have to get the gene fluid, Lone Wolf shouted at the four people. Ning Shu rolled his eyes. It was obvious that they could not win. Why should they fight? However, Ning Shu's actions were not slow. Shooting at the zombie was useless. Shouldn't they be glad that the zombie did not want to kill them? The zombie seemed to be angered. It roared at the five people with a ferocious expression and rushed toward Ning Shu first. Ning Shu, oh, was it because she looked weak that the zombies were charging at her? Ning Shu saw that the others were only blocking the zombie symbolically. They did not intend to help her at all. She could only save herself. A gray palm reached toward Ning Shu's neck. A rotten smell hit Ning Shu in the face. Ning Shu almost vomited. Ning Shu fired a shot at the zombie's head, but the zombie dodged. Looking at the zombie's claws getting closer and closer, Ning Shu's pupils shrank. Then, before she could react, the zombie's head in front of her suddenly exploded, splashing gray brain matter all over her face. Ning Shu. Not only was Ning Shu shocked, but the surrounding people were also shocked. The zombies' defense was not just for show. It was really hard for them to react and the zombie's head exploded. Ning Shu wiped her face. When she opened her eyes, she saw a car parked not far away. A man stood in front of the car. The man was wearing a black windbreaker. The wind blew the corners of his clothes, making it look elegant. He held a gun in his hand. The black muzzle was aimed at Ning Shu. Ning Shu was not scared to death by the zombie. Instead, she was scared to death by the gun. Even zombies could be taken care of. Ning Shu was scared to death by the gun. Don't. Ning Shu quickly waved her hand. We are all humans. Humans. Ning Shu did not expect to meet the school doctor in such a situation. The school doctor was still wearing that disgusting windbreaker. Ning Shu had experienced several worlds. Seeing the school doctor again felt like a lifetime had passed. Friend, thank you for your help. Lone Wolf said first. The school doctor looked at Lone Wolf indifferently. The black muzzle was still pointed at Ning Shu. Ning Shu's hair stood on end. Pick up the gene fluid on the ground. The school doctor said to Ning Shu. Can you move the gun away first? I'm scared, Ning Shu shouted at the school doctor. The school doctor sneered. Ning Shu hooked his finger. Come here quickly. Ning Shu pulled the zombie's hand away and walked towards the school doctor with the gene fluid. Little Phoenix wanted to walk over to Ning Shu, but was stopped by Ning Shu. Little Phoenix was not willing to give up. She looked at the gene fluid in Ning Shu's hand with a burning gaze. Ning Shu walked slowly towards the school doctor. The school doctor frowned. Don't come so close. You stink. Ning Shu, this fussy clean freak had not changed. Chapter 94. Ning Shu still wanted to express the excitement of meeting an old friend, but the school doctor's disdainful words extinguished the enthusiasm in her heart. It seemed like the school doctor didn't even know her. Ning Shu looked at the school doctor. He didn't look any different from before. He was still tall and sexy, giving people a feeling of abstinence. Especially when the gold-rimmed glasses reflected light, it was too fucking abstinent. Now, he pointed a gun at her with an indifferent face. Ning Shu felt scared. This was someone who killed the female lead and created the apocalypse. Ning Shu just wanted to say, please let him go. Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix clenched their fists, but they didn't dare to move. When Young Phoenix looked at Ning Shu, her eyes were filled with resentment. She seemed to resent Ning Shu for losing the gene fluid and giving it to someone else. The three sides confronted each other. Ning Shu's heart was like a group of dogs. Now, she was the target of two sides. If necessary, she would be the first to be killed. A gust of wind blew, and the breeze rolled up the school doctor's clothes. His clothes were fluttering, and his legs were so long. The wind brushed past Ning Shu's face. Ning Shu even smelled an elegant fragrance. It was probably the school doctor's fragrance. Ning Shu, this is the apocalypse. Why does the uncle have the leisure to use perfume? He doesn't feel guilty for what he did. Does he not feel guilty at all? Friend, put down your guns and let's talk. We are wasting time. It will be troublesome if the zombies are attracted. Lone Wolf said first. Ning Shu suddenly realized a problem. Lone Wolf and the agents didn't seem to know the school doctor. Wasn't the school doctor a wanted criminal? Didn't he even have a picture of him? This person was more valuable than the gene fluid. However, it seemed that the original owner didn't know what the genetic scientist with the code name Madman looked like. She just asked them to find the gene fluid. She probably didn't expect them to catch Madman. Uncle, you are so awesome. Do you have people in your family? Uncle, you are so evil. Do you have people in your family? Ning Shu's face trembled. When she looked up, she could see the black muzzle. She might as well lower her head and pretend not to see it. The school doctor heard Lone Wolf's words and nodded. Lone Wolf thought the person in front of him agreed, but the next sentence made Lone Wolf's handsome face stiffen. Wipe the brain matter off your hands and wipe the gene fluid bottle clean. Ning Shu said. Seeing Ning Shu raise his head with a face full of gray brain matter, he turned his head as if he couldn't bear it. Wipe your face too. At this time, why do you care so much? Ning Shu wiped her hands on her body twice, and then wiped the bottle of gene fluid clean. The gene fluid bottle was very small. It was almost the size of a penicillin bottle. There wasn't much gene fluid in it. When Ning Shu passed the bottle to the school doctor, young Phoenix, who had been holding back, finally couldn't help but shoot at Ning Shu. Ning Shu had been guarding against young Phoenix and Lone Wolf. When he saw young Phoenix move, he activated his chi and ran behind the school doctor. He smelled the scent again. It was indeed the scent of the school doctor. It didn't smell like perfume at such a close distance. It was probably the smell after bathing. Why did it feel like the school doctor didn't live in the apocalypse? Young Phoenix was very confident in her shooting skills. This shot would definitely kill the stupid Hua-er. However, she didn't expect to hit a shadow. How could she be so fast? Seeing that her shot missed, young Phoenix's cold face became colder. She pursed her lips tightly. The school doctor pointed his gun at young Phoenix. Lone Wolf and the others were very nervous. 4 gun barrels pointed at the school doctor. The school doctor's face didn't change. Instead, the other party became more nervous. What's the situation now? Don't come near me. It stinks. In such a serious atmosphere, the school doctor suddenly said. It scared the others so much that they almost fired. Ning Shu was speechless. Now is not the time to talk about this. Uncle, let's run first. As soon as Ning Shu finished speaking, she felt terrible. This scene was so familiar. Why did the school doctor always do things that made people's hearts explode? The school doctor said, I feel like I've experienced something like this before. Roar, roar. The zombies that were shaken off caught up. The mutated zombie was already dead. These zombies seemed to have lost control. When they smelled the scent of humans, they roared even louder and more violently. Okay. The most important thing now is to deal with the zombies. Let's work together to deal with the zombies. Lone Wolf pulled a long face. It showed that he was in an extremely bad mood. I've said it in advance. When dealing with zombies, no one is allowed to backstab. Ning Shu curled his lips. Anyway, he didn't believe a word that Lone Wolf said. The school doctor took the lead and blew off the head of the zombie in front. His speed was very fast. Everyone was stunned. Lone Wolf looked at the gun in his hand with a complicated expression. The latest gun. Ning Shu didn't know what the new gun was, but he felt that the gun in the school doctor's hand was very fast. The bullet speed was also very fast. When the bullet passed through the air, it created white smoke. Roar, these zombies didn't know fear. They only thirsted for human flesh. When the zombies in front fell, the ones behind came one after another. Ning Shu took out his gun to defend against the zombies. Soon, Ning Shu ran out of bullets. He grabbed a wooden stick from the ground and used all his strength to hit the zombie's head. Then the zombie's head exploded like a watermelon. The gray brain matter splashed on Ning Shu's face. The school doctor next to Ning Shu moved a few steps away and tightly pursed his lips. Ning Shu turned his head and saw that the school doctor was a little far away from him. He quickly chased after him. To be honest, Ning Shu would rather believe the school doctor than Lone Wolf and the others. One must know that young Phoenix wanted to kill her just now. The school doctor pulled out a gun from his waist and threw it to Ning Shu. "Go away, you disgusted me." Ning Shu caught the gun in a flurry and shot at the zombie's head. The zombie's head exploded in an instant. "There are too many zombies. Let's go first," young Phoenix shouted with a sharp voice. Some of the zombies were tearing the mutated zombie's body. There would be more zombies later. "Go, how can we go? The car is out of gas." Lone Wolf roared and shot a zombie. Then everyone's eyes moved to the school doctor. The school doctor didn't seem to notice everyone's gaze and patted the dust on his clothes. "This friend." Lone Wolf just opened his mouth but was interrupted by the school doctor. "No." Lone Wolf's face was livid. Seeing that there was going to be a big battle, the school doctor's indifferent look made people angry. Chapter 95. The team's car was out of gas, and after being tortured by the mutated zombies, it was basically scrapped. Therefore, everyone put all their hopes on the school doctor, but the school doctor firmly refused. The surrounding zombies were roaring, and the car was broken. Could it be that they could only rely on their legs to run? Everyone felt particularly miserable today. Ning Shu saw that the nearest zombie wanted to grab her, so she killed it with one shot. Her face was covered in brain matter, and she looked at the school doctor and said earnestly, "Uncle, let's run first." The school doctor looked straight ahead, but he didn't look at Ning Shu's face. "You stay away from me." Ning Shu, crying blind. Lone Wolf gave his team members a look, and slowly moved towards the school doctor's car. The others pretended to fight zombies to cover Lone Wolf. Ning Shu saw that Lone Wolf was trying to pull the car door, and she was a little anxious. She didn't expect Lone Wolf to take her and the school doctor with him. These people were cruel and merciless, and they killed people for the country. "Uncle, uncle." Ning Shu wanted to reach out and pull the school doctor's clothes, but the school doctor quickly dodged. Ning Shu anxiously said, "Uncle, they're going to take your car." Was it going to be the same as the plot, and get dismembered by the zombies? The school doctor suddenly reached out and grabbed Ning Shu's collar, making her stand in front of him. Ning Shu didn't have time to react, and then she saw a zombie not far away suddenly explode, and then the brain matter splattered on Ning Shu's face. "Ning Shu, fuck, this bitch." Ning Shu angrily turned around and saw that the school doctor had already left. She didn't have time to be angry and hurriedly followed him. Lone Wolf was still struggling with the car door, and even wanted to open the hood, but the car couldn't be opened. Young Phoenix and the others were anxious, and they didn't even want to deal with the zombies, so they came to help. Even after using all the skills of the Special Agent Agency, they still couldn't pry open the tortoiseshell out of the car. The school doctor took out the car key, and the car made a sound of unlocking. Lone Wolf thought that it would be a piece of cake to open the door and start the car when the car was unlocked. However, he felt something cold on his head. Lone Wolf didn't want to experience the taste of the gun. He raised his hand, his handsome face a little twisted. "This is a misunderstanding." Lone Wolf squeezed out the words from his throat. The school doctor snorted and took the lead to enter the car. Ning Shu shamelessly sat in the front passenger seat. Looking at the enclosed cars, Ning Shu suddenly felt very safe. Lone Wolf and the rest saw that the man who had appeared out of nowhere did not seem to want to take them away. Their faces were filled with anxiety as they tapped on the car window. Their mouths opened and closed, but they could not hear what they were saying. The soundproofing effect was amazing. The surrounding zombies surrounded them again. Gu Lang's heart was burning with anger. Damn it, there was no end to it. Young Phoenix tapped on the car window beside the school doctor. Her cold face was full of anxiety, and there was a trace of begging. The school doctor squinted at the woman. The car window was opened. Young Phoenix quickly grabbed the school doctor's clothes and shouted, "Please take us away, please." Young Phoenix looked at the school doctor pitifully. The school doctor looked at his clothes coldly and silently pressed the window button. The window immediately went up. Young Phoenix was afraid that her hand would be stuck, so she could only let go of the school doctor's clothes. She took back her hand and looked at the school doctor dumbfoundedly. "Isn't this a joke? If you don't want to, why did you open the window?" Only Ning Shu knew why. The school doctor's obsessive-compulsive disorder and misophobia acted up. In comparison, Ning Shu found that the school doctor was more lenient to her. He only let the zombies splash her face with brain matter. The brain matter was not scary at all. Ning Shu looked at the school doctor. His side face was very cold. There was not even a speck of dust on his black coat. His legs looked especially long as he sat on the car seat. His whole body exuded a temperament of abstinence. Therefore, scientists and doctors were the most likely to be perverts. The school doctor had both identities. She did not know why he did not drive. Ning Shu looked at Gu Lang and the others outside. They were dealing with zombies while desperately tapping on the car window. This feeling was very good. Who are those people outside? The school doctor turned his head and asked Ning Shu. But then he immediately turned his head back and stretched out his slender fingers to take a piece of paper and threw it to Ning Shu. Ning Shu took the paper and wiped the brain matter on her face. Who caused her to be like this? Who disliked her? I am the same as them. We are all agents of the country's special agent group. Ning Shu said honestly. The school doctor raised his eyebrows and looked at Ning Shu. You, agent. Ning Shu was speechless. From these 4 words, Ning Shu felt endless contempt and mockery from the school doctor. Not everyone could be as perverted as you. After experiencing 2 worlds, she realized that this guy had changed the course of human history and became the demon king of destruction. She was still a useless person. The corner of Ning Shu's mouth twitched as she silently wiped the brain matter off her face. When the people outside were about to die of exhaustion, the school doctor opened the car window. Young Phoenix, who had dealt with a zombie, immediately ran over. This time, she did not pull on the school doctor's clothes. Young Phoenix was panting and sweating. The sweat slid down her neck and then flowed to her white chest and into her deep cleavage. Ning Shu gulped a mouthful of saliva. The school doctor looked back at Ning Shu and said disdainfully, "Useless." Ning Shu, oh, why couldn't she understand what the school doctor was referring to? "If you have any requests, just say it." Young Phoenix frowned. "We are out of bullets, please save us." The school doctor asked with an indifferent face, "Anything?" The school doctor's sharp eyes swept across young Phoenix's face. Young Phoenix's face paled and looked at Lone Wolf. Lone Wolf's face was very bad and he nodded at young Phoenix. Young Phoenix took a deep breath and said, "Yes, please save us." "Yes." The school doctor nodded and then said, "Oh right, my car is full of bombs. If I die, I can detonate the car before I die. Also, the windows are bulletproof. You can't get out if you come in. Oh, your sister." Lone Wolf and the others stiffened and quickly got into the car. The school doctor suddenly pulled out a gun from his waist and shot the forehead of the man sitting in the back. The man's face was full of shock before he died. "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Both young Phoenix and Lone Wolf pointed their guns at the school doctor, while Tarantula pointed his gun at Ning Shu, forming a confrontation. "Ning Shu, I didn't kill him, why are you pointing at me?" Chapter 96. Ning Shu didn't understand why the uncle suddenly shot and killed people. If he didn't want to save them, why did he let them get in the car? She didn't understand. The school doctor withdrew his gun and frowned. Didn't you notice that he was bitten by a zombie? Push him out. Huh. Young Phoenix didn't believe him and began to check the dead companion. Finally, she found a claw wound on the arm and the flesh began to turn blue. Push him out. The school doctor said again. Young Phoenix gritted her teeth, opened the car door, kicked the person out and then slammed the door. The person who was kicked out was immediately dismembered by the zombies. The scene was really bloody. Everyone's expression was very complicated. Ning Shu asked the school doctor, "How do you know he was hurt by a zombie?" The school doctor looked at Ning Shu with contempt. "Don't you smell the blood?" Damn, she really didn't smell it. He was indeed an expert in dissection. He was so sensitive to the smell of blood. Lone Wolf, who was pointing his gun at Ning Shu, withdrew his gun. He sneered and said, "Even if that's the case, Flower's face is covered in zombie brain juice. She might also be infected. We should push her out." Damn, what kind of hatred did this guy have with her? The school doctor looked at Ning Shu. "You're infected." "No, I'm not infected." Ning Shu quickly waved his hand. A person who had mastered the peerless martial arts was in good health. "What evidence do you have to prove that you're not infected?" Tarantula laughed, making his ordinary face look sinister. Ning Shu curled his lips and said, "What evidence do you have to prove that I'm infected?" "Okay, Tarantula." Young Phoenix said and then said to the school doctor, "Thank you for saving us." "No need." The school doctor adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses. Ning Shu looked at him and inexplicably felt that the school doctor had some ulterior motive. Was he interested in the female lead? The school doctor stepped on the gas and got rid of the zombies behind. Not long after, he stopped and didn't seem to want to go anymore. Lone Wolf pulled a long face and asked in a deep voice, "Why don't you go? What are you doing here in the wilderness?" Lone Wolf was extremely disgusted and repulsed by this person who had appeared out of nowhere. Ever since he met this person, Lone Wolf realized that his previous winning streak no longer existed. Even his position as the captain was threatened. The school doctor patted his clothes to get rid of the dust, as if he didn't hear Lone Wolf's words. "Hey, what's with your attitude? I'm talking to you." Lone Wolf couldn't help but want to pull out his gun and kill this annoying person. Ning Shu realized that the school doctor was actually quite infuriating, so he asked, "Uncle, why aren't we leaving? Zombies' sense of smell can only detect humans within 2 kilometers. The school doctor explained. Ning Shu was about to kneel down in front of the uncle and asked, "How did you know?" "I've tested it before. I'm always interested in the unknown." The school doctor turned around and looked at Ning Shu. "I've seen people as stupid as you." Ning Shu was speechless. Ning Shu laughed dryly and didn't answer. Lone Wolf fidgeted with his hair and said, "Even so, are we just going to stay here and wait for the zombies to catch up? Then run for 2 kilometers and wait for the zombies to catch up?" The school doctor looked at Lone Wolf coldly, his gold-rimmed glasses glowing with a cold light. He said, "If you mess with your hair again and make the car full of dust, I'll kill you." Lone Wolf's hand froze. He wanted to ignore him, but when he saw the gun on the man's waist, he finally put down his hand in annoyance. Ning Shu's mouth twitched. "Uncle, you're exaggerating. Now is a special time. Survival is so difficult. Don't care about these trivial things." Seeing the man's strength, Young Phoenix and Tarantula didn't dare to speak. Young Phoenix held Lone Wolf's hand and asked him to bear with it. Lone Wolf was even angrier. Losing face in front of his woman was really damaging to his self-esteem as a man. "By the way, I don't have any extra food for you, so you have to go back and find your own supplies," the school doctor said lightly. Everyone was speechless. After a while, everyone returned to the place where the battle took place. The zombies were gone, but the broken van was still there. Lone Wolf took the lead to get out of the car to check if the supplies were still there. Ning Shu also wanted to get out of the car to help, but he was stopped by the school doctor. "You sit here. You'll only cause trouble if you go out." Ning Shu was speechless. However, Ning Shu did not get out of the car. She sat in the car with the school doctor. Moreover, Lone Wolf and the others wanted to kill her, so it was safer for her to stay with the school doctor. When she turned around, she saw that the school doctor's gaze was focused on young Phoenix, who was moving things. His gaze was sharp. Young Phoenix was a special agent, so her senses were very sharp. Naturally, she could feel that someone was looking at her, causing her muscles to tense up. This man's eyes were really sharp, so strong that it made people unable to breathe. Ning Shu asked, "Uncle, do you like young Phoenix?" "Like?" The school doctor smiled faintly. His face looked a lot gentler, but Ning Shu felt that it was even more sinister. "I'm a little interested." The school doctor's slender fingers tapped on the steering wheel. Ning Shu had a feeling of wanting to mourn for young Phoenix. The school doctor once said to a female protagonist that he only wanted her. In the end, he was caught and used as a test subject. He said that he wanted to improve human genes and activate advanced human genes. Then, the world was ruined by the uncle. What did he mean by a little interested? Did he really like her, or did he want to dissect her? The school doctor supported his head with his hand and looked a little lazy. He looked at Ning Shu and asked, "Have we met somewhere before? Why do you call me uncle?" I'm used to calling him uncle. How should I put it? Admit that they were once in cahoots." Just as Ning Shu was about to speak, a buzzing sound suddenly appeared in her mind. Then, a cold mechanical voice said, "Don't worry. Players can't expose their identity. Players are just passers-by. They can't break the rules of the world." She didn't plan to tell the school doctor. Otherwise, the school doctor would definitely dissect her. The school doctor raised his eyebrows and looked at Ning Shu. He snorted. "I'm 18 years old. Uncle, you're definitely older than me. I call you uncle because I respect you." Ning Shu casually came up with an excuse. This body was only 17 years old. The people in the car were chatting, but Lone Wolf and young Phoenix, who were moving things, had an argument. Lone Wolf didn't want to be with the school doctor anymore, but young Phoenix said that she still wanted to follow the school doctor. They should at least go their separate ways when they reached a safe place. Chapter 97. Young Phoenix's reason for insisting on following the school doctor was very good. This place was very desolate, close to the border, there was no one, and there were so many things. Did they have to rely on their 2 legs to walk? Besides, there were only 3 people left in the team, her, Lone Wolf, and Tarantula. Young Phoenix had subconsciously kicked Ning Shu out of the team. What if they encountered zombies? Carrying these things, could they outrun zombies? If they encountered a mutated zombie, they had no way to resist it. Lone Wolf knew that he was being unreasonable, but he inexplicably did not want to be with that man. That man gave him a very dangerous feeling, and his heart was very repulsed. But young Phoenix's reason was very good. The other man in the team, Tarantula, was also on young Phoenix's side. 2 against 1, Lone Wolf could only compromise. He pulled young Phoenix's hand and said, "Stay away from that man. I think he has bad intentions towards you. Don't be fooled." The school doctor, who was called a pervert, was calm and did not care about Lone Wolf's words. He was so calm that Ning Shu could not help but admire him. In fact, Ning Shu understood why Lone Wolf did not want to follow the school doctor. It was because the school doctor was too awesome. His light was too dazzling, overshadowing the brilliance of the male lead. What kind of person was the male lead? He was born to feel superior and had his own pride. How could he tolerate being inferior to others? But in the current situation, Lone Wolf could only endure the anger in his heart. He moved the things to the car while looking at the school doctor with resentful eyes. The school doctor silently looked at his fingernails and did not pay attention to him. Lone Wolf's handsome face was livid with anger. When the things were moved, the three people got on the car. Tarantula saw the leisurely Ning Shu and could not help but say, "Some people only know how to eat for free and don't know how to help. What did she do to offend this guy? He was always looking for trouble with her. Didn't you move up? What does it matter if I'm there or not?" Ning Shu was now relying on the school doctor's support. "You!" Wolf Spider raised his fist at Ning Shu. Then, he glanced at the school doctor in fear and mocked Ning Shu, "You thought you found a big backer." Ning Shu had a smug look on his face. "Tarantula, stop messing around." She then turned to the school doctor and said, "Friend, where are you going next?" Ning Shu did not know if it was his imagination, but when young Phoenix spoke to the school doctor, her voice sounded much softer. In fact, this was a normal phenomenon. For agents like them, in order to complete the mission, it was necessary to use their own advantages to take some necessary measures. For example, young Phoenix had a hot body and a beautiful and cold face. These were her advantages. Ning Shu looked at his own face in the rearview mirror. His face was covered in dust and dried brain matter. His facial features were ordinary and his hair was messy. One word, unsightly. Ning Shu glanced at the cool and elegant female lead and silently tidied his hair, smoothing out his messy hair. Oh my, she really did become the female lead's foil. There were only 2 women in the team, and her existence was the perfect foil for young Phoenix. He completely suspected that the original owner's existence was for this purpose. Bitter. Hearing young Phoenix's words, the school doctor raised his eyebrows and turned his head to look at young Phoenix. Young Phoenix almost imperceptibly straightened her chest and said, "Where are you going?" The school doctor adjusted the glasses on the bridge of his nose and asked, "Where do you plan to go?" "I'll follow you." Hearing this, young Phoenix's face showed a smile, making her face even more beautiful. However, Lone Wolf's face was cold. Just like that, the school doctor joined the team. Young Phoenix went wherever she wanted to go. Lone Wolf was so angry that he pulled a long face all day long. When they met zombies, he would be the first to rush up and vent his anger on them. However, young Phoenix trusted the school doctor more and more. Every time Ning Shu saw the school doctor's cold eyes, his heart tightened. Especially when he saw young Phoenix face the school doctor with a little girl's attitude, Ning Shu was even more horrified. "Uncle, you are going to counterattack and become the male lead's rhythm." The apocalypse was so realistic. In such an extreme environment, human nature would be magnified countless times. The primitive rule of human beings was the law of the jungle, and the strong would be respected. Worshipping the strong and submitting to the strong was an instinct. The uncle had advanced weapons in his hands, and he was fast and agile. Every time he faced zombies, he would not panic. What was even more valuable was that this man did not seem to be living in the apocalypse. Clean clothes, neatly trimmed nails, and there was not a speck of dirt on his body, which made him exceptionally charming. On the other hand, Lone Wolf was so angry that he slashed and stomped on zombies all day long. He did not have any elegance. His clothes were dirty, and his whole body smelled of sweat. With such a contrast, Lone Wolf was simply set in the mud, and the male lead's halo dimmed. However, what Ning Shu was more concerned about was the purpose of young Phoenix's group. They had been looking for the gene fluid for many days, but they did not find it. Ning Shu touched the gene fluid in his pocket. This gene fluid was taken from the mutated zombie. At that time, the school doctor found the bottle dirty, so Ning Shu put it away. However, after so long, the school doctor did not ask for it from her. Ning Shu naturally would not be stupid to give the gene fluid to the school doctor. Ning Shu had always been curious about the gene fluid. What was it that could make the world like this? According to the original owner's memory, the leader of the special agent group said that the country wanted to strengthen the body and improve the genes. The person in charge of this project was a genetic scientist with the code name Madman. However, he did not expect that the gene fluid would be developed. However, not everyone could be strengthened. There was a 50% chance of activating the high-level genes of the human body and awakening abilities. There was also a 50% chance of becoming a monster that did not feel pain, had infinite strength, and only had appetite. Moreover, the virus carried by the body could assimilate the human body into its own kind. The school doctor who created this situation ran away with the gene fluid, and the monsters in the laboratory rushed out, causing disaster to the world. The people in the laboratory who were lucky enough to awaken their abilities were recruited by the country. In order to recover the gene fluid that was taken away by the school doctor, Ning Shu's group was sent on a mission. Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix knew about the gene fluid's effect, so they betrayed the country and took the gene fluid. Uncle, you are really a sinner. What was the school doctor's purpose for following this team? Did he have a hobby of dissecting the female lead? Come here. The school doctor uncle waved at Ning Shu, as if he was teasing a puppy. Ning Shu walked over with a black face and asked, Uncle, what's the matter? Come, break this steel bar. The school doctor uncle pointed at Ning Shu's thumb-thick steel bar and said. Ning Shu, why? Chapter 98. Ning Shu heard that the school doctor wanted her to bend the steel bar. What kind of joke was this? Why do I have to bend the steel bar? Ning Shu asked. The school doctor looked at Ning Shu. His gold-rimmed glasses were glowing, and he looked like a monster. Ning Shu immediately picked up the steel bar on the ground. Use all your strength to bend it, the school doctor said. Ning Shu nodded. She used all her strength to bend the steel bar. It didn't break, but it bent. Ning Shu asked the school doctor, is this okay? The school doctor nodded and reached out to touch Ning Shu's arm. Ning Shu threw down the steel bar and ran far away. She looked at him warily. Uncle, what are you doing? Damn, being touched by the uncle was so scary. I'm just testing your strength. I noticed that you're quite strong before. Ning Shu waved. Come here, let me touch you. Ning Shu, come here, let me touch your muscles, the school doctor repeated. Ning Shu felt uncomfortable. She was strong because she had mastered the ultimate martial arts. Ning Shu felt ashamed every time she thought of the name of the secret manual. Ning Shu walked to the school doctor with small steps. When she saw the school doctor touching her body with a cold expression, Ning Shu felt cold all over. Why did she feel like she was going to be dissected by the school doctor? After touching her, the school doctor nodded. Although the muscles aren't big, they're quite tight. This is the ideal state. When the school doctor spoke, his gold-rimmed glasses reflected light. Ning Shu was so scared that she almost peed her pants. Was the school doctor going to dissect her? This is your dinner. Young Phoenix walked over and broke the affectionate gaze between Ning Shu and the school doctor. Young Phoenix held 2 boxes of hardtack and 2 bottles of water in her hands. She passed them to the school doctor. The school doctor passed a box of biscuits to Ning Shu. Ning Shu quickly took it. She was already hungry. When young Phoenix saw this scene, her eyes flickered. Ning Shu said, Flower, come out for a moment. I have something to tell you. Ning Shu felt quite confused as to why little Phoenix was looking for her. She followed little Phoenix out of the house. This house was quite simple and crude, and it was made of mud. No one had lived here for a long time. This was the temporary resting place for the team. Young Phoenix stopped, and Ning Shu stood 2 meters away from young Phoenix. This was the safest place for both of them. Ning Shu was on guard against young Phoenix. "Why are you looking for me?" Ning Shu asked. Young Phoenix Ning Shu stretched out her white hand. Seeing Ning Shu's blank face, she said coldly, "Flower, hand over the geno fluid. We can complete the mission." "Gene fluid? I don't have the geno fluid," Ning Shu said. Young Phoenix's face turned cold. "Don't play dumb. The geno fluid was stolen by the mutated zombies. It ended up in your hands." Ning Shu suddenly realized something and said, "That geno fluid, I don't know where it is. If you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten about it." Then, Ning Shu made a guilty face. "Sister Young Phoenix, it's all my fault." Young Phoenix was unhappy when Ning Shu called her sister. Seeing that the other party was so stubborn, she said coldly, "Flower, we are all from the Special Agent Group. Do you want to see us fail the mission and be punished by the officer?" Ning Shu rolled her eyes. "You all betrayed the country. Why do you care about punishment?" These words were just to coax the original owner. Ning Shu cried and anxiously said, "What should I do? I really lost the geno fluid. The situation was so dangerous and there were zombies. I didn't even notice where I lost it." "You." Young Phoenix was speechless because of Ning Shu. She coldly snorted and turned away. Ning Shu curled his lips and finally went back to the house to eat dinner. Eating biscuits every day, Ning Shu was about to vomit. But these things were easy to carry and not easy to spoil. They were the best choice. The school doctor didn't know where he got the milk. He was drinking it when he saw Ning Shu come in. He asked, "Why is she looking for you?" Ning Shu's eyes turned. He was thinking if he should tell the truth. If he told him about the geno fluid, wouldn't it remind him? What if he wanted to go back? In the end, Ning Shu told the truth. "She asked me about the geno fluid." The school doctor didn't say anything. He drank the milk and didn't ask Ning Shu for it. Ning Shu was a little touched. "Uncle, you are really a good person. Although you are a pervert." Young Phoenix who just left came back. This time, not only Young Phoenix came, but also Lone Wolf and Tarantula. Walking into the house, Lone Wolf coldly snorted. He looked at the school doctor with hostility. His handsome face was a little decadent. He didn't look like the future overlord of the base. Everyone was sitting at a simple table. Lone Wolf, who was sitting at the head of the table, coughed. He tried to show a little momentum. It looked like he was bluffing. "Young Phoenix, you say it." Lone Wolf said to Young Phoenix. He really didn't want to talk to this man. Seeing this man, Lone Wolf felt suffocated. This team was actually divided into 2 teams. One was Lone Wolf, Young Phoenix, and Tarantula. The other team was Ning Shu and the school doctor. The relationship between the 2 teams depended on Young Phoenix. "Do you know what we are going to do?" Young Phoenix asked the school doctor. The school doctor drank a mouthful of milk and didn't speak. Young Phoenix seemed to understand the school doctor's personality and said, "We are going to find the geno fluid." Everyone looked at the school doctor. The school doctor didn't have any expression. Young Phoenix was a little frustrated. This man was really difficult. She had encountered many missions, but she had never met a man like him who was indifferent to her. This geno fluid can stimulate people's abilities and strengthen the body. Now that there are more and more zombies, human survival is getting more and more difficult. Finding the geno fluid can stimulate more ability users to deal with zombies. Young Phoenix said with a serious face. The school doctor finally finished his milk and stuffed the unfinished biscuits into Ning Shu's arms. Ning Shu silently ate the biscuits left by the school doctor. "If you are looking for the geno fluid, you don't have to. The geno fluid is half finished, and Madman is dead." the school doctor said lightly. Puff, cough, cough. Ning Shu, who was eating the biscuits, choked and quickly drank water. Hearing the school doctor say that Madman was dead, he said indifferently that he was dead. What was the school doctor trying to do? Fake death to give the wrong information that Madman was dead. Lone Wolf frowned and coldly asked the school doctor, "How do you know? How do you know that Madman is dead? Who are you? You are the most mysterious person in this team. You don't even have a name." Even young Phoenix's face showed suspicion and asked, "How do you know that Madman is dead?" "I killed Madman," the school doctor said lightly with a look of pity on his face. "He destroyed the geno fluid." Puff, cough, cough. Ning Shu choked again and hammered his chest. Chapter 99. Listening to the school doctor's nonsense with a straight face, Ning Shu felt uncomfortable. This made Ning Shu, the only one who knew his identity, feel itchy in her heart. She really wanted to say that this guy was crazy. How could he kill a crazy person? Suicide? The school doctor raised his eyebrows and looked at Ning Shu. Seeing her rolling her eyes, he reached out his hand and patted Ning Shu's back. He said faintly, "Such a big reaction. Do you have a problem?" Ning Shu waved her hand and said, "I don't have any problem." What problem could she have? Seeing the school doctor's cold face, she didn't dare to say anything even if she had a problem. The person who got rid of the gene fluid has the nerve to stay here. How thick-skinned. Don't you feel guilty at all? Young Phoenix retorted. Because of you, many people have been killed and infected by zombies. Ning Shu, listening to young Phoenix's accusation, Ning Shu reflexively looked at the school doctor. Those words should be directed at the school doctor. The person who created the zombies should feel guilty. Seeing Ning Shu staring at him, the school doctor shrugged and said, "I didn't lose the gene fluid. It's useless for you to look at me." Ning Shu, once again, her understanding of the school doctor was refreshed. The school doctor's face was one of the thickest in the world. "Flower, I'm talking to you. Where did you lose the gene fluid? Do you know how important it is?" Young Phoenix asked Ning Shu calmly. Ning Shu rolled her eyes. "I didn't even remember where I lost it. There were so many zombies. I didn't even have time to deal with the zombies. How could I remember the gene fluid? Even if you lose your life, you should protect the gene fluid." Young Phoenix accused Ning Shu. Damn, there was no end to this. Ning Shu slammed the table, and suddenly the shabby table completely fell apart. "Young Phoenix, do you want to fight with me?" Although the young Phoenix did not like her before, it maintained a noble and cold attitude, unlike now when it was fighting with her and trying to suppress her. Ning Shu looked at the unperturbed school doctor uncle. Could it be that the female lead was jealous because she was close to the uncle? "Little Flower, I'm not going to argue with you because you're young. Are you done yet? Do you think you're going to be so arrogant just because you have someone backing you up?" Young Phoenix said coldly. She looked at the school doctor with resentment in her eyes. Hua Duo did not have a good figure. In terms of looks, compared to her, Hua Duo was simply ugly. Why did this man want to be close to Hua Duo instead of her? Thinking of this, the young Phoenix's expression became even more bitter. Lone Wolf saw the resentful look on young Phoenix's face, and his face turned ugly. He shouted, "What are you arguing about?" Now was the time to plan where to go next, not to argue about such details. Young Phoenix said, "Without the gene fluid, it's useless to say anything." Lone Wolf looked at the school doctor with a complicated expression. Finally, he said, "Since Madman is dead and the gene fluid has been destroyed, let's go back." Lone Wolf's meaning was obvious. He was not going to carry out any more missions and was ready to go back. Ning Shu did not have any objections. Anyway, the gene fluid was in her hands. When she went back and handed it to the head of the special agent group, her mission would be considered completed. Then, she would have to think about survival. However, she could not show that she wanted to go back. Ning Shu said listlessly, if we go back like this, we won't get anything. We'll be punished. Young Phoenix rolled her eyes at Ning Shu. Who is this all because of? Anyway, it's not because of her, Ning Shu said silently in her heart. In the end, the team unanimously agreed to go back. Now that there was no gene fluid, and Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix had not awakened their superpowers, they naturally needed the power of the country to protect themselves. For the time being, they did not want to betray them. The atmosphere suddenly became silent. Lone Wolf snorted and took the lead to leave. He glanced at Ning Shu with impatience and killing intent in his eyes. Ning Shu leaned against the school doctor. The school doctor's cold eyes met Lone Wolf's. Lone Wolf snorted and turned to leave. Flatterer. Tarantula mocked Ning Shu. The school doctor turned his head. Ning Shu sneered. Your teammates. Why is your character so bad? Ning Shu, haha, who knows? You're quite strong. Is it natural? The school doctor asked Ning Shu as he adjusted his glasses. His eyes reflected the light, giving people a dangerous feeling. How should he answer this question? Why did he feel that the school doctor was up to no good? Uncle loved to dissect and study talented people. Ning Shu grinned at the school doctor and said, Uncle, I was born this way. The school doctor did not say anything else. Ning Shu waved his hand, and Ning Shu immediately moved in front of the school doctor. Don't get so close. The school doctor said. Ning Shu curled his lips and took 2 steps back. When will the school doctor change his bad habit? The gene fluid is on you. Have you ever thought about awakening your superpower? The school doctor asked Ning Shu. Ning Shu almost jumped up. Seeing the school doctor's indifferent face, he gave up quibbling. He shook his head and said, I don't want to. Why? Your teammates all want to get the gene fluid to awaken their superpower. The school doctor raised his eyebrows and looked at Ning Shu. Are you afraid of becoming a zombie? To be honest, this 50% probability was really bad. You either become a superpower user or a zombie that only knows how to eat human flesh. Ning Shu quickly nodded. I'm afraid of becoming a zombie. The school doctor's expression was very disdainful. You don't even dare to try the 50% probability. Useless. What's the use of trash like you? Ning Shu heard the disdain in the school doctor's voice. Ning Shu said, you can laugh as much as you want. I still need this gene fluid to complete the mission. Uncle. Ning Shu sat next to the school doctor and asked, Uncle, where do you think this gene fluid came from? Ning Shu had always been curious about how this gene fluid came about. The school doctor faintly glanced at Ning Shu. Why are you so close to me when you want to talk? TSK, bitches are so pretentious. Ning Shu moved to the side. Ning Shu didn't expect the school doctor to be able to answer her question. The school doctor was just so capricious. The school doctor adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses and said, in fact, supernatural abilities are the same as the cultivation in the legends. They both have attributes. The so-called spiritual root is actually a high-level gene. This gene fluid was actually experimented on by a madman from a woman. He extracted the high-level gene fragments from her body. Some people failed to activate it because they couldn't match the genes in the gene fluid. Instead, their genes were messed up and they became monsters. However, some people could match the high-level genes in the gene fluid and activate the hidden high-level genes in their bodies. Ning Shu, oh, uncle, are you crazy? Is your family made? The woman the uncle was talking about was the female lead of the school world, Simida. The female lead was treated like this. She was definitely the most aggrieved female lead in history. She was probably dead by now. Chapter 100. Originally, they were going to look for the gene fluid, but after such a long time, they still couldn't find the gene fluid. The team was already disheartened, and the school doctor said that Madman was dead, so there was no more gene fluid. Thus, they decided to go back. More importantly, they encountered more and more zombies on the road, and there were more and more mutated zombies. So far, they had encountered 3 mutated zombies, and these mutated zombies could summon other zombies. The team was struggling to deal with these mutated zombies, so the decision to go back was basically unanimous. But what Ning Shu couldn't figure out was why the uncle followed them back. Was he walking into a trap? Flower, get up. The school doctor used his foot to nudge Ning Shu. Ning Shu opened her eyes, rubbed her eyes, and followed the school doctor into the car. Young Phoenix originally wanted to sit in the front passenger seat, but Ning Shu took the seat first. Young Phoenix stared at her and sat in the back. Along the way, Ning Shu felt a chill on the back of her head. Needless to say, this was young Phoenix's gaze. Ning Shu was now sure that young Phoenix's attention had shifted to the uncle, and Ning Shu heard young Phoenix and Lone Wolf arguing more than once. Anyway, it was about whether or not he would betray her, and then young Phoenix would quibble, and there was no blah blah blah. But the school doctor, as the person involved, was indifferent as if nothing had happened, and he did what he should do. This made Lone Wolf gnash his teeth, and wanted to kill the uncle more than once. Ning Shu certainly didn't want anything to happen to the uncle. Once the uncle was in trouble, she would also be in trouble. Didn't he see Lone Wolf's eyes looking at her with killing intent? The school doctor who was driving the car didn't look good, and said faintly, "There are zombies again." The atmosphere in the car suddenly became tense. Damn, is there an end to this? Tarantula cursed. Along the way, they had encountered countless zombies. Everyone had a feeling that there were only a few of them left in the world. They really didn't see a single person. How did the zombies survive? They were running out of supplies and ammunition. Ning Shu was now killing zombies with an axe and a stick. The only person in the group who had a gun was the school doctor, but he didn't have any intention of leaving. At most, he would help Ning Shu when he was about to be bitten by zombies. Towards the others, it didn't matter if they were there or not. The school doctor said that there were zombies coming. Sure enough, it didn't take long before they heard the roars of zombies. There were zombies around the car trying to surround it. The school doctor's face was cold. He stepped on the accelerator and directly rushed to the zombies in front of the car, and then mercilessly ran over them. Ning Shu was about to throw up from the bumpy ride. Dong, a loud sound came from the roof of the car, and then the whole car shook twice. Everyone's face turned ugly as they encountered another mutated zombie. Why are there so many mutated zombies? Ning Shu looked at the school doctor uncle. The uncle's face was calm and indifferent, but his tightly pursed lips showed that he was in a bad mood. Ning Shu said to the school doctor uncle, "Uncle, why don't we get off the car and kill the mutated zombies?" "Flower, don't talk nonsense if you don't have a brain. There are so many zombies outside. If we go out, we will be surrounded by zombies. There are also mutated zombies. You want everyone to die." Young Phoenix said with a cold face. Lone Wolf and Tarantula looked at Ning Shu with an unfriendly face. Ning Shu frowned and said, "Now the mutated zombies are on top. What if they break the car? Without the car, we will be torn apart by the zombies in minutes." Did they really think that she was willing to get off the car and face the zombies? Bang bang. The mutated zombies on the roof of the car kept the roof down. The uncle's car was relatively sturdy, so there was no problem for the time being. The uncle madly stepped on the gas pedal to get rid of the low-level zombies. Then he stopped the car and said to the people in the car, "Get off the car and kill this zombie." Everyone had no choice but to get off the car first. They madly fired at the zombies on top of the car, but the zombies were not harmed. Everyone's face showed a helpless look. The gap between the two sides was too big. Ning Shu held the gun and shot at the zombies, but the zombies dodged. Damn, where did these mutated zombies come from? The school doctor uncle narrowed his eyes and aimed at the zombies, but he did not shoot. It was estimated that the zombies' speed was too fast. Lone Wolf threw away the gun in his hand and directly used a hidden weapon, but it was useless. Instead, the zombies got close to him and were about to take out his heart. Lone Wolf! Young Phoenix screamed. Quickly shoot! Lone Wolf rolled on the ground to avoid the zombies' attack and shouted at the school doctor uncle. Tarantula and Young Phoenix went up to help, but the zombies seemed to be targeting Lone Wolf. They must kill the male lead first. The school doctor uncle did not shoot. He kept aiming but did not shoot. It was estimated that he was looking for an opportunity. The zombies attacked Lone Wolf again. This time, Lone Wolf was one step slower and did not dodge the zombies' attack. Seeing that Lone Wolf was about to be killed by the zombies, suddenly, Lone Wolf's hand burst out a lightning-like light and hit the zombie's body. The zombie's body immediately emitted white smoke. The mutated zombie was stunned. Apparently, it was shocked by the scene in front of it. Its gray face showed fear. Everyone was stunned as they stared blankly at Lone Wolf's hand. Even Lone Wolf had a blank look on his face. Then, ecstasy filled his face as he muttered, "This is a superpower, a superpower." Taking advantage of the zombie's blank space, the school doctor uncle pulled the trigger and exploded the zombie's head. Although the school doctor uncle killed the zombie, it made Lone Wolf's heart full of anger. He asked the school doctor uncle, "Why didn't you shoot just now?" Lone Wolf looked at the school doctor uncle with a malicious face. His hand was still releasing the lightning power. Apparently, he wanted to kill the school doctor uncle. Ning Shu was very nervous. He said to Lone Wolf, "Uncle gave a lot of thought to let you awaken your special ability in a critical moment." Sure enough, he was beloved. He actually awakened the lightning power to restrain zombies. The lightning power was the most harmful to zombies. Lone Wolf heard Ning Shu's sophistry and sneered, "If I didn't awaken my special ability in a critical moment, I'm afraid I would have been killed by the zombies. I will not spare this guy." Ning Shu could see that now that Lone Wolf had the ability, he wanted to take revenge and establish absolute prestige in the team. Lone Wolf's hand flashed with lightning. His face was full of eagerness. Apparently, he wanted to kill the school doctor uncle. The school doctor uncle raised his gun and pointed it at Lone Wolf's forehead. He sneered, "You're just a beginner with special abilities. Let's see if you're faster than my bullets." Lone Wolf's face trembled. He looked at the black muzzle and then looked at the school doctor uncle's indifferent face. He unwillingly withdrew his special ability. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.